I woke up confused. One moment, I was deep in the dark forest on a special mission, and the next, I was in a broken-down house with a beautiful, trembling girl beneath me. She was crying, begging me to be gentle, calling me husband. Her name was Wan Qing, and somehow, she was my wife. Memories that weren't mine flooded in, and I understood. I had crossed over into another body, another world. This was the Daily Empire, a border village called Siwa. The empire was falling apart. Enemies at the gates, corrupt officials bleeding the people dry, famine everywhere. The body I now occupied belonged to a worthless drunk, a local thug. Through some twist of fate, this loser had married not one but two sisters from a wealthy family. The Moose sisters, Wan Qing and Wan Qing. Their family had been desperate. The law here said any girl over 13 had to marry or her whole family would be punished. So these two beauties ended up with this piece of trash. And what did the original owner do? He drank away all their dowry money in months, beat them, starved them, and treated them like dirt. Now the house had no food, no money, nothing. I got dressed and looked around. For bare walls. These two women had stayed through all that abuse. That meant something. The older sister had gone out early to dig for wild vegetables and still hadn't come back, which worried me. The younger one, Qing, was terrified. She kept offering herself to me, begging me not to sell her to the brothel. Apparently, the old me had already agreed to hand her over to some tavern owner to pay off debts. I felt a pang of guilt for what this body's previous owner had done. I told her gently not to be afraid, that I would take care of her and her sister from now on. She stared at me like she couldn't believe it. In her eyes, kindness from me was just a trick before something worse. I had my priorities straight, survival first, everything else second. I knew how to hunt and fish from my training. If I could get us fed and find some money, I could carve out a life in this chaotic world. But with northern barbarians pressing on the border, time was short. I needed to move fast. When I got back inside, the older sister Wan Qing had just returned with a basket of wild vegetables. She saw Qing crying and immediately dropped to her knees, begging me to spare her little sister, offering to go cook right away. But when she moved, a wound on her back from thorns split open and started bleeding. She bit her lip and held back tears. I was getting frustrated. These two were so scared of me, they couldn't even think straight. I told them plainly, stay home, make vegetable soup, eat, and wait. I was going out to find real food. They just stared at me, not believing a word. When I repeated myself in a firm voice, they flinched like I was about to hit them. The old Lu Feng had trained that fear into them deep. I didn't bother explaining more. Time would prove I'd changed. I grabbed a rusty little knife and a bag and headed out. What I didn't know was that behind me, the sisters broke down crying. They thought the bag meant I was going to sell them. Wan Qing told her sister that if anyone tried to touch them, they'd rather hang themselves. That's how bad things were. I made my way past the village toward the mountains. The river nearby was almost fished out, everyone's first idea during famine. But few people dared hunt in the hills. You needed proper tools, and wild beasts could kill you just as easily. That meant the mountains were still full of game. My body was skin and bones. I needed meat, lots of it, to rebuild my strength. Autumn was perfect. Animals were fat, fattening up before winter. I had no bow, no real weapons, just a wooden spear I carved on the way up. But I knew how to set traps. Using vines and branches, I rigged several snares in no time. Then I got lucky. A civet cat appeared, sniffing around for fallen fruit, completely unaware of me. I crept behind a tree, waited for it to come closer, and threw my spear with everything I had. It tried to dodge, but I'd already predicted which way it would run. The spear punched clean through it. A quick knife stroke finished the job. I threw the carcass over my shoulder and ran downhill fast. Blood attracts predators, and in my current state, even a wild boar could finish me off. As I ran, I was already planning. Civet meat was a delicacy the rich would pay well for. The hide was tough and flexible, good for rope or a bowstring later. Near the village river, some women doing laundry spotted me. They recognized me and started gossiping. The village drunk, the wife beater. But when they saw the fat civet on my back, their eyes went wide. They hadn't seen meat in ages. They swarmed me. One offered to share her bed for a piece. Another said she was younger and better than my wives. They were shameless about it, desperate for just a taste of meat. I pushed past them. Move. I brushed off the village women without a second thought. told them to go find their own men if they wanted meat. They were stunned. The old Lu Feng would have never talked to them like that. Behind my back, they grumbled and made crude jokes, scheming to send one of their lovers after me. Back home, I found the sisters sitting in front of a bowl of thin vegetable soup, not touching it. They'd been waiting for me to eat first. That was the rule the old me had beaten into them. I told them to eat. They just stared, confused. Then I showed them the civet cat. Their eyes went wide. They hadn't seen real meat in who knows how long. But I could see the wheels turning in their heads. Was I fattening them up before selling them off? I explained the plan. I'd butcher the animal, we'd eat some of the meat, and I'd sell the rest in town to buy proper hunting tools. When they finally understood, I wasn't selling them. Both sisters broke down crying. Looking at them in their torn rags, the old me had even pawned their wedding clothes for booze. I felt a wave of shame for the previous owner of this body. I needed to earn money fast, at least enough to get them decent clothes. I asked for a bowl to work with. Ching'er nervously told me there were no porcelain bowls left. The old me had smashed the last one while beating her sister. All that remained were 3 blackened wooden bowls. I swallowed my embarrassment and made do. I skinned and butchered the civet quickly, hung some meat on bamboo strips for storage, set aside most to sell in town, and gave the sisters a good portion with the organs to cook. When the food was ready, the 2 of them handed me chopsticks and stood back, waiting. The old rule: he eats first, they get the scraps. Sit down. We eat together, I said. They froze. They looked terrified, like it was a trap. Wanqing quickly thanked me on behalf of both, trying to refuse politely. I'd had enough of this fear. I leaned in and kissed each of them on the cheek. They turned bright red, completely lost. These 2 had been married to this body for months, but had never received a single gentle touch. I pointed at my own cheek, telling them to kiss me back. They leaned forward shyly, gave me a quick peck each, then stood perfectly still like soldiers awaiting orders. I walked behind them and gave each a firm slap on the backside. I slapped their backsides, not hard but firm. First one's for not eating the soup like I told you. Second one's a warning. Disobey me again and you'll get more. The third slap caught Ching'er off guard, and she let out a soft sound that surprised even her. Her face turned red to her neck. Her sister bit her lip and stayed quiet, but I could tell she felt the same. Then Ching'er suddenly grabbed onto me, tears in her eyes. She begged me to consummate the marriage, with both of them. She said even if I beat them to death, fine, but I couldn't leave them untouched. In this place, if a married woman stayed a virgin, it was shameful for her whole family. The law in Yuzhou even punished the bride's parents if she didn't get pregnant. I grinned and told them we'd get to that tonight, one at a time. Ching'er's face went scarlet, but she looked almost excited. Her older sister stayed quiet and composed, as always. Sit. Eat, I ordered. They obeyed but wouldn't touch their chopsticks until I mixed meat and broth into their vegetable soup and set it in front of them. They stared at the chunks of meat like they were dreaming. Wanqing tried to refuse, saying I needed it more. I told her she'd get another spanking if she didn't eat. That worked. They ate in small bites, sneaking glances at me. I finished mine fast and went outside to train. My body was weak, but the bones were decent. With proper food and daily exercise, I could get back into shape. While I was working out, I heard footsteps approaching. 3 men. The leader was Lier, the village bully and the one who'd led the old Lu Feng down the path of drinking and gambling. He had 2 thugs behind him. He came strutting in, grinning. Said he'd heard about my catch. Then his tone shifted. He told me to hand over my wives so he and his boys could have some fun. If I refused, he'd kill me and take them anyway. I asked him to repeat himself. He did, even louder, adding more filth. That was enough. I hit him in the throat so fast he didn't see it coming. Before he could choke out a sound, I drove my fist into his chest, sending him crashing into the mud wall. Then I grabbed his head and snapped his neck. Clean. Quick. No scream. The 2 thugs behind him had never seen anyone die before, let alone like that. They turned to run. I caught both of them in seconds. 2 more cracks of bone, 2 more bodies on the ground. At the doorway, the sisters had seen everything. A wooden bowl slipped from Wanqing's hands and split in 2 on the ground. They were frozen in shock. I sighed. I'd hoped to handle it before they noticed. But Wanqing surprised me. Her voice was shaking, but she spoke clearly. I heard everything. You did this to protect us. I'm not afraid. Ching'er nodded right after. I'm not afraid either. They were trembling head to toe, but they held their ground. These two were tougher than I expected. I held both sisters in my arms and told them everything would be all right. They melted into my chest. For the first time, they felt safe. Chinger looked up and asked if I was lying to them. I met her eyes and told them to go wash up and wait for me in bed. We were consummating the marriage tonight. I hauled the 3 bodies up the mountain and dumped them deep in the forest. Figured the wild animals would clean that up. I gave the forest a few £100 of meat in exchange for 1 civet cat. Fair trade. I rushed home. The night was everything I'd hoped for. Chinger volunteered to go first. She was nervous, clumsy, but eager. Her sister followed. I held back my strength. These girls were fragile, and I planned on keeping them for a long time. No point breaking them on the first night. The next morning I woke early with both of them curled up in my arms. Wanxing promised they'd be ready for me whenever I wanted, her face buried in my chest with embarrassment. Chinger just giggled. Different personalities, one shy, one bold, but both mine now. After washing up, I sharpened my rusty knife on a stone. It was my only weapon. I told the sisters to stay put and headed for town with the remaining civet meat. The inn bought 28 gene of meat for 2,800 coins, plus 10 extra for the scraps. I regretted selling the bones. They could have made good soup for the girls back home. But I needed the money. Walking through town, I got a quick education on prices in this broken empire. Silver was the only reliable currency. My haul equaled about 2 taels and 8 coins of silver, a fortune in a starving world. I made a list of what I needed most. A proper bow was too expensive, so I settled for the next best things. I found a decent blacksmith shop on the west side of town and picked out a sharp axe, good for hunting, chopping wood, and fighting. I bought arrowheads too, since I could make the shafts and bow from wood later. I also ordered a spear tip to be forged. All of that cost 300 coins. Then I thought about my wives shivering in rags. Silk was out of the question, but I bought a few bolts of plain cloth. Cotton for winter bedding, mixed with reed fluff to save money. Pots, bowls, basic household things. 500 coins gone. At the grain shop, I understood why food was the real currency of this era. Even rough mixed grain cost 30 coins per measure. Clean white rice was 100, fine flour 60. I bought mostly cheap grain to get us through winter, with a little rice and flour for variety. Last stop was the medicine shop. Both sisters were covered in wounds from the old me's abuse, and I needed them healthy. Mountain hunting meant injuries too. I couldn't have my women carrying scars and old pains, not when I had plans for many more nights like the last one. Coming out of the medicine shop, I noticed something. A man across the street turned away the moment I looked at him. I'd seen this same man 4 times today, always lingering nearby. When our eyes met, he glared at me and walked into a gambling house. Someone was following me. I recognized the man tailing me. He was a runner for the gambling house and tavern. The old Lu Feng owed debts everywhere, had pawned the land deed and everything of value. This guy saw my money and went to round up trouble. I wasn't worried. If they came for me, I'd settle old and new scores together. I hired an ox cart and rode back to Siwa village. The whole village came out to stare like I was some kind of celebrity. Word of my hunt had already spread. Nobody dared approach this time, not after yesterday. They just followed the cart, drooling at the supplies piled on it. At the house, the neighbors crowded around the sisters begging for scraps. One wanted rice, another wanted cloth, another wanted cotton for her son's coat. The sisters didn't know what to do. I threw my axe into the door plank. It stuck there, gleaming. Everyone went quiet. I told them the deal was simple. Send your men to chop trees for me. 1 tree gets 1 gene of rice. I needed lumber to fix the house before winter. Other than that, stay away from my wives. After the crowd scattered, I handed the sisters several bolts of nice fabric and told them to pick bright colors and make themselves proper clothes. Use the cotton to stuff a big blanket for winter. They couldn't believe it. They said the fabric was too fine for them and tried to give it to me instead. I could tell they were still thinking I was dressing them up to sell them. I grabbed Chinger's hand. Ice cold, shivering. Not cold, she says. Right. I told them to stop arguing and gave them the medicine I'd bought. After dinner, strip down and wait. I was going to treat their wounds myself. They shuffled inside, glancing back at me with every step, hearts pounding, still not sure what to make of this new version of their husband. While they started cooking, I overheard them chatting. Chinger mentioned that a woman named Xiao Fong had taken them foraging today and helped them find a big basket of beautiful wild vegetables. Xiaofang. That name hit me like cold water. She was Li Er's woman, the bully I'd killed yesterday. I snatched the basket away. The sisters froze in terror, thinking they'd done something wrong. I pulled back the cloth covering the vegetables, and my suspicion was confirmed. These greens were huge, perfectly grown. In a famine where people strip bark off trees, you don't find vegetables like that growing wild. They were poisonous. That woman had deliberately led my wives to pick toxic plants, planning to kill us all. My face went dark. The sisters collapsed to the ground, clinging to each other, crying. They thought I was blaming them. Qing'er begged me to hit her instead of her sister. She swore they'd never try to poison me, that they were grateful for everything I'd done. I didn't say a word. I sorted through the basket, pulled out the poisonous ones, and set them aside. Then I handed back the safe vegetables and told them to cook those. Wanqing took the bowl with dead eyes. She thought I was making them eat the poison as punishment. In her mind, she'd already accepted death. Under Yuzhou law, attempting to kill your husband meant execution. She figured letting them die by poison was mercy. At least they'd keep their bodies whole. She had no idea I was trying to save them, not punish them. The vegetable soup boiled while I explained everything. I took the sisters to the back room and gently rubbed medicine on their wounds. When I told them the truth, that Li Er was Xiaofang's lover, and that she'd tricked them into picking poisonous plants on purpose, they broke down crying. Not from fear this time, but from realizing I didn't blame them. Qing'er kissed me hard after I finished treating her back. Both sisters gave themselves to me completely that evening, body and soul. Whatever doubt was left between us dissolved. Afterward, I prepared the poisonous vegetables in a wooden bucket, mixed with a little rice, and got ready to pay Xiaofang a visit. Wanqing surprised me. She insisted on coming along. In her mind, anyone who schemed to kill her husband deserved to watch death come. I hadn't expected that kind of steel from such a quiet woman, but I liked it. In this world, softness gets you killed. We reached Xiaofang's place at the east end of the village. The moment she saw me, terror filled her eyes. She'd secretly followed Li Er that night and watched me snap 3 necks like twigs. She'd been too scared to sleep, too scared to report it. No bodies meant no evidence, and the law in these parts would just as easily kill her for a false accusation. Her solution had been the poison trick. Use my naive wives to do the killing for her. But here I stood, alive and angry. I told her I would have let it go. Survival is hard enough without making enemies. But she'd tried to murder me through my own wives. That I couldn't forgive. She tried to run. I caught her easily, threw her down, and hit her across the face until blood ran from her mouth. No mercy. Then I called Wanqing over with the bucket. I expected to do it myself. But Wanqing stepped forward, eyes cold, hands shaking but voice steady. She tried to kill my husband through our hands. She deserves this. She grabbed Xiaofang's jaw, forced it open, and shoved every last poisonous leaf down her throat. Then she picked up the wooden bucket and smashed it over Xiaofang's head. The bucket shattered. Xiaofang stopped moving. Wanqing collapsed into my arms right after, completely drained. She whispered that she wouldn't be a burden to me. I held her tight and told her she was anything but. She was exactly the kind of woman a man needed in times like these. I carried her home and left her with Qing'er. I still had more to take care of. I got to work on a bow. The civet skin had been drying and was starting to curl. Perfect. I burned off the outer fur, soaked the hide, cut it into thin strips, then twisted 3 strips together into cord. The result wasn't as strong as deer sinew would be, but it was enough for a medium-strength bow. A real powerhouse weapon would have to wait until I could hunt bigger game. While I was working, I heard thumping outside. I grabbed my axe and went to the gate. 3 skinny men stood there, each carrying a log on his shoulders. I couldn't believe it. Someone actually took me up on the wood for rice deal. The leader was Tian Lao Ba, a big honest fellow with a simple smile. He said his wife told him about the offer, so he brought cedar wood, good stuff for building. The other 2, Wang San and Yang the cripple, were the same type, hard-working, no tricks, just trying to feed their families. I called the sisters out with rice, gave each man 2 bowls instead of 1. Tian Lao Ba tried to refuse the extra, saying 1 bowl was plenty. That kind of honesty was rare and valuable. With the right training, a man like that could become a real warrior. I told them to keep bringing wood, and I'd keep paying at the same rate. Promised them they wouldn't go hungry if they worked for me. They were speechless. This was more generosity than they'd ever seen. I had to push them to accept before they finally left. Looking at those 3 logs, something clicked in my head. I was the capital. The hunting, the resources, the knowledge, it all started with me, but I couldn't scale it alone. Those extra bowls of rice weren't charity. They were an investment in loyalty. Then a bigger idea formed. Why limit myself to hunting? I could organize the whole village. Get people working, building, producing. Lead everyone to a better life. If I did that, even the provincial governor would have to pay attention. I started planning the house. 3 rooms, a main hall, bedroom, and kitchen, built with rammed earth walls and timber framing. Warm in winter, cool in summer. A giant heated brick bed in the bedroom for the cold months. But I calculated I'd need over 10,000 mud bricks. That meant labor, which meant money I didn't have yet. One problem at a time. That evening, Tian Lao Ba came back, out of breath, carrying several pieces of wood. The moment I saw them I knew, perfect bough material. The right thickness, natural curve, good length. In my old world, a genuine wood bough would fetch millions from collectors. I paid him with rice and a cut of meat, then got straight to work. Shaped the bough blank with my axe, lit a grass fire to dry it. Wood doesn't hold much moisture, so it dried fast. Then I boiled flour into paste and wrapped hemp thread layer by layer around the bough to reinforce it against snapping. Deer sinew would have been better, but hemp would do for now. The sisters watched me work with wide eyes. They'd thought my talk about building a house was just empty words, but here I was already gathering materials and making tools. They went inside without being told and started cleaning up the place, then began cooking dinner. The house was a wreck, but they were trying to make it feel like a home. That night after dinner, I made arrows while the sisters sewed a cotton quilt by lamplight. Wan Qing worked quietly with a gentle smile. Qing'er kept giggling and blushing whenever she caught me looking. I couldn't resist. I scooped up Wan Qing and carried her to the bedroom, calling Qing'er to follow. The next morning I headed out early with my new bow, grumbling. My wives were beautiful and willing, but their bodies were too weak to keep up with me. Wan Qing had even started talking about finding me a concubine. The real problem was nutrition. They needed meat and proper food to build up strength. One more reason to hunt big today. My first stop was where I'd dumped the bodies. Not a trace left, not even blood. Something large had eaten everything clean. That meant a serious predator lived nearby. I kept my bow drawn and moved carefully. In my condition, even one wound could be a death sentence with no real medicine available. Half an hour deeper in, the trees grew massive, the kind that takes several men to wrap their arms around. I'd reached the edge of the old-growth forest. Danger and opportunity lived side by side here. I climbed a ridge and scanned the valley below. There they were, deer. My heart raced. Deer meant everything. The meat was excellent. The sinew was the best material for a proper bow, and deer traveled in herds, which meant I might bag more than one. I tracked them until I was barely 10 meters away. A big buck stood before me, thick antlers with 3 or 4 points, muscles rippling under a glossy coat. A walking mountain of protein. I drew and released without hesitation. The arrow punched clean through the buck's body and came out the other side. I didn't rush, just followed at a steady pace as the animal's breathing got heavier and its blood trail grew wider. Then it started veering off course. I needed to finish this fast before the blood attracted predators. I sprinted, faster than the wounded deer, screaming imitations of tiger and lion roars to panic it further. When I saw the right angle, I leaped off a tree trunk, drew full, and sent a second arrow straight through its heart. The buck crashed down, twitched twice, and died. I cursed myself when I saw how much blood had spilled on the ground. Deer blood was precious, wasted. Next time I'd plan the kill better. I lashed together a quick frame from vines and branches, loaded the carcass, and dragged it downhill fast. Back at the village, I ran into the village chief, Wang Changsheng, heading to the fields with his wife and workers. They all froze at the sight of the big buck on my sled. The chief had heard rumors about me turning my life around. The civet hunt, the supplies, the house plans, and had scolded his wife for believing gossip. Now the proof was staring him in the face. His wife tugged his sleeve, gushing about how beautiful the antlers were, how every part of a deer was treasure, how antler wine was a miracle cure. She covered her smile with her hand, teasing the old man with a flirty look. The village chief Wang Changxing intercepted me on my way home. He was in his 30s, lived well compared to everyone else. Brick house, farmland, hired workers. His problem was that his first wife never gave him children, so he'd bought the top girl from the local brothel as a second wife. She'd worn him out so badly he couldn't perform anymore, and she never let him forget it. He tried to lowball me, called me 3 legs, an old nickname the workers gave me because of my size, and offered 2 tails of silver for just the antlers. Said he was doing me a favor as village chief. I wiped the sweat off my back and asked him if he'd ever eaten swan meat. He puffed up and said of course. I asked again, had he really? He hesitated. I told him to stop dreaming and pushed past him with my cart. What I didn't notice was his wife staring at my bare back like a hungry wolf. Apparently my shoulders and muscles made quite an impression. She was already scheming. If her husband couldn't give her a child, maybe someone else could, and the baby would carry the Wong name regardless. I had no interest in that mess. Back home, I dropped off the deer and went out again to gather wild herbs, yellow essence root especially. I'd spotted some on the way down the mountain. The round trip took over an hour. On my way back, I saw Wang Chongqing beating his wife by the field. Probably caught her being indecent again. Not my business. I had an idea brewing. The local wine was terrible, weak, sour, barely alcoholic. I'd bought some cheap bottles and jars in town, so I built a simple still. I redistilled the wine, mixed in deer blood and the yellow essence root, and took a sip. It hit hard. This was real liquor, strong, warming, and packed with ingredients rich men would pay a fortune for. Another way to make money. I butchered the deer carefully, kept the sinew, hide, and organs. Hung about 30 gene of meat for our own use. The rest, close to 200 gene of venison plus the antlers and several jars of my new medicinal wine, I'd sell in the county town, where buyers had deeper pockets than the local inn. The problem was transport. I needed an ox cart, and the only person in the village who had one was Wang Chongsheng, the same man I'd just insulted this morning. I swallowed my pride, pocketed 100 coins, and walked to his house. It was the finest in the village, proper brick walls and dark tile roof, generations of wealth on display. Most families here lived in straw huts. At the gate, I spotted Wang Chongqing's brother, Wang Chongshuan, peeping through the doorway with a disgusting look on his face, one hand busy below his waist. He was spying on the chief's wife. He scurried off when he saw me. The butler Wang Sen opened the door. The moment I mentioned borrowing the ox cart, his face dropped. He rattled off all the costs the chief would demand. Feed money, wear and tear money, probably money for every drop of sweat the ox produced. I slapped 20 coins into his hand. He paused, then kept making excuses. The master wasn't home. He couldn't decide on his own. I cut him off. Since when can't this house function without him? I'm deciding. Let's go. The door opened, and out came Wang's wife in a flowery dress, hair still damp, bruises on her neck from the beating. When she saw me, her eyes lit up in a way I recognized instantly. She pulled me inside and shut the door, dropped her dress off one shoulder, and laid it out plain. Her husband couldn't perform anymore. She wanted me to get her pregnant so she could give him a son. In return, I could use whatever I needed from the Wang household, no charge. She wasn't bad looking, but years of cheap makeup and easy living had taken the shine off. I had 2 gorgeous wives at home. This woman didn't interest me one bit, but I needed that ox cart. So I played along. Told her I had a special preference. I liked to wash up first, and I liked the woman blindfolded. She giggled and said she'd done kinkier things back at the brothel. She went to the back room to get ready. The moment the curtain dropped, I slipped outside and ran straight into Wang's brother, the peeping pervert from earlier. A plan clicked into place. I pulled him aside and whispered that the lady of the house was waiting inside, blindfolded, ready to go. His eyes nearly popped out of his skull. He thanked me like I'd saved his life. I heard them get started. I grinned, grabbed the ox cart from the butler, and left. If she found out later, so what? It was still Wang family seat. And neither of them would dare tell anyone. I loaded up the cart at home and headed for the county town. The trip took the rest of the day. I sold the venison to the biggest restaurant in town. The antlers and my deer blood medicinal wine went to a pharmacy. Various leftover bits got snatched up by a passing merchant at a good price. When I counted everything up, I'd made over 60 taels of silver. Unbelievable. 1 deer was worth enough to buy a house in town. I spent wisely. 50 measures of grain at the rice shop, a real iron spear from a blacksmith, plus saws, hammers, and other building tools. The cart filled up fast. As night fell, I noticed a crowd outside the county magistrate's office. Wounded soldiers, missing legs, missing eyes, lining up for their pitiful pensions. 30 taels for a dead man's family, less for the crippled. Then I spotted a familiar face. Mu Xiaowang, my wife's older brother. He was in terrible shape. One leg gone, one eye gone, leaning on a crutch. He'd only been at the front for 4 months. Seeing him like that chilled me. War was chewing up ordinary people and spitting out broken husks. It also meant the fighting was getting closer. I needed to prepare faster. I bought salt, then headed to the livestock market. The government had loosened rules on buying cattle, though they kept beef prices low to stop people from slaughtering work animals. Everything was expensive in a famine. A scrawny ox cost 15 taels, enough for a normal family to live on for years. I paid without blinking. Then I bought a flock of chick hatchlings and a brand new ox cart. The dealer threw in free feed, grateful for such a big customer. I drove through the night to get home. By dawn, the sisters saw the chicks pecking around the yard and the ox tied outside, and they threw themselves at me, kissing my face. In a world of starvation, chickens and an ox meant a future. Wan Qing ran to cut grass for the ox. Qing'er started building a pen for the chicks. For the first time, this broken-down house was starting to feel like something real. I returned the borrowed ox cart to the Wang household. The wife glared at me like she wanted me dead. She'd obviously figured out who actually visited her that night. Not my problem. I dropped off the cart and ran home. 2 days later, everything at home was in order. I loaded up my new ox cart with gifts, deer blood wine, 5 measures of grain, rabbits and pheasants from my traps, and told the sisters we were visiting their parents. They went quiet the whole ride, hands clenched tight, barely breathing. I handed Wan Qing a pouch with 2 taels of silver and told her to give it to her family. She looked at my bloodshot eyes, felt the new clothes on her body, and started trembling. Then out of nowhere she said, "Husband, my sister and I want to give you children." I laughed. "How many?" 8, 10. Right now? Qing'er piped up without missing a beat. "Yes, right now works." There was nobody around for miles. The mountains were beautiful, the weather was fine. So we pulled the cart over and spent 2 hours in the tall grass before continuing the journey. After that, the sisters' mood lifted completely. The Mu family lived on the edge of the county town in a modest mud brick house. Their father, Mu Linfeng, had been a respected doctor with a proper stone courtyard home. But after his health declined, he sold his clinic. Then, with both daughters unmarried and the government piling on extra taxes, he'd been forced to sell his farmland and the family estate. Now the old couple lived in near poverty, sometimes depending on their eldest son for help. When we pulled up, the sister's mother opened the gate, a handsome woman in her 40s. The moment she saw her daughters, tears poured down her face. The girls dropped to their knees and wept. I tied the ox to a tree and went inside. The eldest brother, Mu Xiaoyang, was at work at the magistrate's office. The second brother, Mu Xiaowang, sat in a bamboo chair in the yard, one leg gone, one eye gone. A broken man sunning himself while his father carefully dressed his wounds. I let the family have their moment and wandered the courtyard. It smelled of drying herbs. The shelves held medicinal plants and nothing else. They had almost nothing. My father-in-law eventually came over to greet me. He was polite but stiff. He'd only met me once, at the wedding, and he knew exactly what kind of trash the old Lu Feng had been. The only reason he tolerated me was for his daughter's sake. I told him not to fuss and started unloading the cart. Grain, meat, wine, I stacked it all in the yard. As the pile grew, the old man's face went from surprise to alarmed. He thought I was returning the dowry. In his mind, that meant I was divorcing his daughters. A divorced woman in this world was ruined, and his whole family could be exiled. He rushed over, voice shaking. "Son-in-law, what is this? If you need anything, just tell me. Just treat my girls well. That's all I ask." I was confused for a second. I'd come to show respect, and he thought I was sending his daughters back. Before I could explain, the sisters overheard and remembered what I'd told them to do. Wan Qing pulled out the silver pouch. "Father, Mother, this money is from our husband, to honor you both." The sisters did all the talking for me. They told their father how I'd been hunting, earning money, stockpiling food for winter, buying an ox and cart, even gathering lumber for a new house. They painted me as the perfect husband. The old man's face shifted from disbelief to shock, when he went outside and saw the ox with his own eyes. In this empire, owning a cow meant you were somebody. His hands trembled. He grabbed my arm, eyes wet, and called me a good son-in-law over and over. Said he'd been wrong about me. Then he dragged me to the table and demanded we drink together. I warned him about the deer blood wine. It was strong, nothing like the weak rice wine people drank here. He waved me off, said I was insulting his tolerance, then drained a full bowl in one gulp. His face turned red as fire. He choked, coughed, and screamed for water. I distilled that wine multiple times using techniques from my old world. It was at least 40 degrees. Unheard of in this era, where most liquor barely reached single digits. Once he recovered, he got curious, asked where I'd learned to brew something like that. I told him I'd made it myself and explained that beyond drinking, strong alcohol could clean wounds and kill infection. His eyes went wide. He was a lifelong doctor. He understood immediately what that meant. Then he asked if I knew medicine. I said just a little. He laughed so hard tears came out and declared that heaven had sent him an heir for his medical knowledge. He'd been worried his skills would die with him. After the meal, conversation turned to the war. Mu Xiaoguang, the wounded brother, confirmed what I'd feared. The northern barbarians had reached the border of Yuzhou. Enemy spies were already operating inside the province. He said if the fighting wasn't contained by winter, the family would need to flee south by spring. That hit me hard. I'd spent most of my money already. Running south wasn't guaranteed to be safer. I needed a bigger plan, and fast. Then an idea struck me. The gambling house. That's where fast money was. I filed it away for when I got home. That evening, the father-in-law arranged rooms for us. I went to tend the ox first. Before going to sleep, I'd asked Tian Laoba to guard our house while we were away. In a starving world, you couldn't trust anyone. Leave grain and chickens unguarded overnight, and you'd come home to bare walls. The old man, meanwhile, couldn't wait to get his wife behind closed doors. That deer blood wine had lit a fire in him he hadn't felt in years. The sisters covered their mouths, laughing as their parents disappeared into their room. Then the wine caught up with the sisters too. Both of them had drunk more than usual, and the deer blood and herbs were doing their work. By the time I finished with the ox, they grabbed me by both hands and pulled me toward the bedroom, begging me to hurry. The next morning we spent some time in the county town, then headed home after lunch. As we entered the village, something was wrong. Every villager was rushing toward the fields with sticks and farm tools. I grabbed someone and asked what happened. Wild boars, a whole herd of them, had come down from the mountains and were destroying the crops. The famine had driven villagers to strip the mountains bare of fruit and roots, leaving nothing for the animals. Now the boars were taking their food from the fields instead. This was terrible news for the village, but perfect for me. Free meat, no climbing mountains. I rushed home, geared up, bow, arrows, axe, spear, and headed to the river fields. The sisters insisted on coming. They wouldn't let me go alone. When I arrived, about 30 villagers stood on the embankment, too scared to move. 8 wild boars were tearing through the vegetables below. The leader was massive, 500 gene at least, a monster with tusks that could gut a man. Wang Changsheng was losing his mind. Most of this land was his. He was screaming at people to charge in, offering half the pork to anyone who killed the boars. Nobody budged. 3 of his workers had already tried and gotten mauled, lucky to escape alive. The moment people saw me, their faces lit up. The village women were practically drooling, whispering about the hunter who'd killed a deer with 1 arrow. They called me the arrow god. Wang Changsheng saw me too, but instead of asking nicely, he marched over and blamed me. Said my hunting had driven the animals down from the mountains. Demanded I fix it and pay for damages. I sidestepped him. He fell face first into the muddy paddy, covered head to toe in black sludge. I told him his logic was garbage. If that was his attitude, I'd just wait until the boars finished eating. We'd see whose losses were bigger then. I planted my spear in the ground and crossed my arms. He crawled out of the mud, still trying to be tough. Told me to stop playing games and act. I didn't move. Then he tried going himself. Grabbed a stick from one of his workers and waded into the field toward the boar king. One swing, the stick snapped like a twig. The beast flipped him into the air with its snout, then charged and drove a tusk into his back. Blood sprayed everywhere. He barely made it back to the embankment alive. Limping, bleeding, he stumbled behind me. Fine. Whatever you want. I agree. I laid out my terms. Every villager who helped would get 30 coins from Wang Changxing's pocket. Anyone injured gets an extra 10. And all the boar meat goes to me, though I'd share some with the helpers. He nearly choked, but with boars still devouring his livelihood, he had no choice. He agreed to everything. I pulled my spear from the ground and addressed the crowd. You heard the village chief. Anyone who wants to earn money, step forward. But when we fight, I give the orders. Anyone willing, come here. The villagers lined up eagerly. My reputation had been building. Everyone knew I kept my word. Tian Lao Ba and his crew had been eating well since working for me, and the whole village had noticed. Plenty of others had tried bringing wood to my house while I was away, but the sisters didn't dare make deals on their own. Today was their chance to prove themselves useful. I laid out the plan. Wild boars are tough, thick skin, bad temper. A head-on fight would get people killed. Instead, we'd be smart about it. I split everyone into groups. Tian Lao Ba and Wang Xin would lead teams to lure the smaller boars away from the fields and into the tree line, where the animals couldn't charge freely. They'd throw rocks, make the boars slam into trees and boulders until they were dizzy and exhausted. Then I'd finish them off. The Boar King was mine to deal with personally. I drew my bow. The beast was close enough that at this range, my arrow could punch through bone. I aimed for the center of its forehead and released. The arrow buried itself deep into the skull. The monster squealed, lowered its head, and charged straight at me, tusks gleaming. But the wound was fatal. It made it only a few steps before crashing face-first into the mud, barely breathing. With the king down, the rest of the hunt went smoothly. The teams drove the smaller boars into chaos while I picked them off one by one with arrows. Before long, all 8 were down. Tian Lao Ba had the men drag every carcass into a pile. Then Wang Changxing's brother, Wang Changshuan, strutted over. This was the same pervert I'd sent into his sister-in-law's bedroom. He had the nerve to demand half the pork, claiming we were close and that I'd used his family's ox cart. When I brushed him off, he grabbed my collar and whispered that he had dirt on me, threatening to expose what happened that day. I almost laughed. He was the one who slept with his brother's wife. What did that have to do with me? This idiot had no leverage and no brains. He swung at my face. Bad move. I caught his wrist and crushed it. The crack of bone echoed across the field. He dropped to his knees screaming. I slapped his shoulder hard enough to pop it out of its socket. Then I walked to the pile of boars, tossed my spear into the air, caught it spinning, and whipped it forward with a kick. The blade whistled through the air and planted itself between Wang Changshuan's legs, a hair's width from ending his bloodline. He shrieked and fainted on the spot. I slapped him awake, then went to butcher the pork. The wild boars and the money from Wang Changxing mattered, but that wasn't really the point. What I wanted was something more valuable: respect and trust. Every person here watched me keep my promises, lead the hunt, and put a bully in his place. That reputation would be worth more than any pile of meat. I didn't kill Wang Changshuan. No point making an enemy of the village chief over his worthless brother. Not yet anyway. The villagers crowded around me, praising the hunt, begging me to teach them archery. I started dividing the pork. Tian Lao Ba, Wang San, and Yang the cripple worked the hardest, so each got a whole pig leg plus 10 extra gene of meat. Everyone else got 5 gene of meat and 2 gene of organs. Nobody complained. When they heard the numbers, they couldn't believe it. 5 gene of pork was worth 50 coins, more than most of them earned in weeks. Some of them were practically in tears. There were over 2,000 gene of boar meat total from 8 animals, and even after all the sharing, the vast majority stayed with me. But to those villagers, this was the most generous thing anyone had ever done for them. I kept Tian Lao Ba's crew behind to help process the remaining carcasses. Told them we'd have a butcher's feast when it was done. Then I headed home with the sisters to get the ox cart. That's when my instincts kicked in. I'd left in a hurry and forgotten to post a guard. Before leaving, I'd wedged a small twig in the door crack, an old habit. The twig was on the ground now. Someone had been inside. I told the sisters to hide behind a tree and approach the house alone with just my axe. I pushed the door open slowly. A blade came slashing down at my face from above. I blocked it with the axe, grabbed the attacker's wrist, kicked him, and hurled him out the door. Before I could breathe, another slash came from the side. Heavier, faster. I dodged into the yard. The gate slammed shut behind me. A man with a long knife stepped out from behind it, cutting off my escape. Eyes cold, like a predator sizing up prey. Four more armed men emerged from inside the house. I was surrounded. I recognized the leader immediately, one arm, the enforcer for the gambling house and tavern in town. He'd lost his arm years ago collecting a debt and had been vicious ever since. He ran the day-to-day operations for the owner, who stayed in the shadows. He grinned at me, said I'd been living well lately. Ox cart, full pantry, 2 beautiful wives. Then he reminded me of the old Lu Feng's promise. If the gambling debts went unpaid, the wives would be handed over. He wanted the money, the women, and probably planned to burn the house down on his way out. I could tell from how he'd set this up that there were more men hiding nearby. One arm was cautious. He wouldn't come here without backup. But caution or not, the moment these men stepped into my yard, they were already dead. They just didn't know it yet. Bring out everyone, I told him. This isn't enough, he laughed. You want to die faster? Fine. He called out his best fighters, the 4 dogs. His deadliest men, the ones he only sent when he wanted someone to disappear completely. They had me surrounded, 10 men with blades. One arm grinned like he'd already won. But having everyone out in the open was exactly what I wanted. Easier to kill when you can see them all. I moved before they could blink. One breath, and I was in one arm's face. He tried to block with his knife, but my axe cut clean through his remaining hand. Blood shot out like a fountain. I flipped the axe and took half his face off before he hit the ground. The rest came at me. One swung for my neck. I spun and opened his throat with a single stroke. 2 rushed me together. I dodged the first blade by an inch, took the arm off the second man, then kicked another one across the yard. When they swarmed me all at once, I rolled out, threw a wooden rack to create space, then dove back in swinging. It was over in moments. 10 men, all dead. The yard was a mess of blood and body parts. I wiped my axe on one arm's clothes and noticed the blade had gone dull. Cheap iron. Couldn't hold an edge through that many bodies. I made a mental note. Someday I'd build a proper steel furnace. I opened the gate and waved the sisters over. They crept forward, pale-faced. They'd watched the whole thing. Even after seeing me kill before, watching me cut through 10 armed fighters in seconds was something else entirely. Wanqing asked if I'd been some kind of hidden master all along. A warrior tired of killing who'd come to this village to live in peace. Qing'er jumped in, eyes spinning with theories from storybooks. Maybe I was the leader of an assassin guild who'd retired from the underworld. I wiped the blood off my face with the cloth Qing'er handed me and just smiled. Don't ask, let them wonder. A little mystery never hurt. Wanqing had grown noticeably calmer about violence since she'd killed Xiaofang herself. Qing'er was still working through it, but getting braver each time. I stashed the bodies temporarily and cleaned up the worst of the mess in the yard, then hitched the ox cart and headed to the river to collect the wild boar carcasses. Tian Lao Ba and his 2 men helped me butcher and process everything until well past midnight. Honest, hard-working men. I liked them more every day. I gave each of them a small jar of deer blood wine and some grain. They tried to refuse, as usual. I had to practically force it into their hands. While we worked, I asked them about the village, who was reliable, which young men had potential, which women were hard-working and trustworthy. They thought I was recruiting for the house construction and eagerly volunteered names. I memorized every one. After loading all the processed pork onto the cart, I brought out something I'd been keeping quiet about, a strange device I'd had custom-made at the blacksmith in the county town. It looked like a bow mounted on a wooden stock with a groove for an arrow on top. Wanqing stared at it, baffled. She'd seen me bring it back from her parents' place, but assumed it was a part for the ox cart. It was a crossbow. Wanqing stared at the strange device I'd brought out and asked what it was. I told her it was called a crossbow, a battlefield weapon with devastating power. The blacksmith had never seen anything like the design I'd sketched out. That told me either the Dali Empire didn't know about crossbows, or the court had banned them from civilian hands. Either way, it meant opportunity. Manufacturing costs were low, but the selling price could be enormous. This particular one was a heavy crossbow, so powerful you needed your legs to draw it, not just arms. I'd also made 2 smaller ones for the sisters, but there was no time to show them tonight. When I told them I was going out, they panicked. Qing'er grabbed my arm, begging me not to go to the brothel. She offered to go learn techniques from the girls there so I wouldn't need to visit. I almost lost my composure. I explained the real reason. I'd just killed 10 of the gambling house's enforcers. Their boss would already know something was wrong. If I didn't deal with this tonight, they'd come for us again, with more men. I kissed both sisters on the cheek, told them to lock the door, and rode the ox cart into the night. An hour later, I reached the Hanyuan gambling house, the biggest in town. The place was huge, flashy, lit up like a palace. I didn't go through the front door. I climbed onto the roof, peeled back some tiles, and watched from above. What I wanted wasn't just blood, it was money. Every coin those gamblers lost flowed somewhere, and I needed to track where it went. War was coming to our doorstep. Silver mattered more than anything now. Tonight, I was going to hit them hard. The gambling house kept about 30 fighters on payroll, fed, housed, and given regular trips to the brothel to keep them loyal. Their top enforcer was a man called Yang Lao-san, third master, a 9-fingered veteran who'd crawled out of a battlefield corpse pile. A serious fighter, not like the thugs I'd killed earlier. I waited on the roof until the early hours, when the boss finally showed up. Boss Lee, fat belly, waddling in with bodyguards. Young Lao-san rushed over and whispered to him, reporting that One Arm's team hadn't come back, no doubt. Useless trash, Boss Lee shouted loud enough for me to hear. I feed them for nothing, and they can't handle one Lu Feng. I smiled in the darkness and raised my crossbow. The bolt aimed right at Boss Lee's thick neck. As a mercenary, I knew when to strike. Patience was everything. I had the shot, but I didn't rush. Young Lao-san was nearby, and he was the real threat. Better to wait for the perfect moment. I released the crossbow bolt. It cut through the dark like a black snake and punched clean through Boss Lee's neck. He grabbed at his throat, blood spraying between his fingers, eyes bulging. He tried to scream, but nothing came out. As he fell, he saw my shadow on the rooftop. That was the last thing he ever saw. Young Lao-san, third master, dove under a table. Smart instincts. But my crossbow punched through the table and buried itself in his shoulder. He'd never seen a weapon that could do that. He pulled the bolt out, wincing, and decided to run. His boss was dead, so loyalty no longer applied. But I was already dropping through the roof. He turned and slashed upward. Too slow. I took his arm off with one of his own men's blades, then opened his throat. He fell knowing exactly who killed him. The gambling hall erupted into chaos. Gamblers scrambled for the silver on the tables, fighting each other like animals. In the confusion, nobody noticed me slipping through the crowd like a shadow. Every time I passed a guard, another body dropped. Elegant, quick, no wasted movement, like a dance with a bloody knife. The third-ranking fighter, a man called Big Head, spotted me. He wore iron knuckle rings that could shatter bone and offered 100 taels to whoever killed me. That got the remaining guards fired up. Big Head was clever. When I swung at him, he grabbed a bystander as a shield. His fist was already cocked behind the dying man's body. I killed the shield, barely dodged the punch, and kicked him back. He absorbed most of the impact and came swinging again. But I was faster. My blade went through his stomach before his fist reached me. He took 2 more stabs through the chest before collapsing. "Who are you?" he gasped as he fell. "You shouldn't have bothered me," I said, and kicked him away. The remaining guards broke, screaming, crying, calling me a demon. I didn't let a single one leave alive. One wounded man tried crawling out the back. I caught him in the dark with a crossbow bolt. When it was done, I set the building on fire. The stored liquor exploded in chain after chain of blasts. The gambling house and the connected tavern burned to ash together. By dawn, I was driving my ox cart casually into the morning market. Behind me, county officials were already at the scene, pulling charred bodies from the rubble. Among the investigators was Mu Xiaoyang, my wife's eldest brother, the constable from the county magistrate's office. He'd ridden through the night to get there. I drove right past the smoking ruins without a second glance. I drove my ox cart right past the crime scene the next morning without flinching. Mu Xiaoyang spotted me and waved. I smiled back and pointed at my cart full of pork. He gave me a thumbs up. He already knew I'd visited his family, and everyone at home was singing my praises. Selling over 1,000 jin of wild boar meat took most of the morning. I hit every inn and restaurant in town before it was all gone. The total came to 107 taels of silver. I loaded the cart with grain, rice, oil, and flour for the trip home, all visible on top. The real treasure was strapped underneath the cart: silver, banknotes, and a bit of gold from the gambling house raid. When I turned the last corner toward home, 2 thin figures were standing on the dirt mound outside our gate, staring down the road. They'd been waiting all night. The moment they saw my cart, their shoulders dropped with relief and tears filled their eyes. Inside, I showed them the haul. Ching'er looked at the banknotes, then burst into tears, not from happiness, but from fear. She begged me never to leave them alone at night again. Wan Qing said the same. They didn't care about money. They just wanted me safe and home. I promised them I was done with nighttime raids. The gambling house debt was settled permanently, and besides, who would take care of them at night if I was out working? Then I remembered the pawn tickets. The old Lu Feng had pawned everything, land deeds, valuables, even the sister's dowry, to feed his gambling and drinking habits. Wan Qing had quietly saved those crumpled tickets, buried in a cloth bundle under a stone slab in the yard. 3 acres of farmland, pawned for just 3 taels. I'd get it all back. I told them my plan: redeem the land, farm it, hunt, build a real home. Someday, I'd buy the whole village and make them landladies. Qing'er's eyes went wide. Wan Qing just shook her head gently and said she'd be happy with a simple life. Then we counted everything together. Banknotes worth about 1,000 taels. Over 600 taels in silver. Loose coins and small gold pieces pushed the total past 2,000 taels. The sisters couldn't believe it. This was more cash than the village chief had ever seen in his life. I stood in the yard and looked toward the center of the village, the flattest, best-positioned land. That's where I'd start. First step, build a brick kiln. I'd seen plenty of them during my mercenary years in the wilderness and knew exactly how they worked. Labor wasn't a problem. The whole village was available. I just needed to give the order. After lunch, I sat on the old stone in the yard and planned. Exhaustion caught up with me in the afternoon, and I fell asleep. When I woke up, it was dark, both wives curled up beside me. I didn't think twice. Wan Qing stirred first. I rolled on top of her before she could say a word. She gasped and melted into me. Qing'er woke up moments later, giggled, and wrapped herself around us both. By the time I finally fell asleep again, I was completely spent. When I woke the next morning, breakfast was ready and hot water was waiting. Over breakfast, Wan Qing dropped a bombshell. She wanted me to take a concubine. I nearly choked. Qing'er hesitated at first, then agreed. Their reasoning was twofold. First, they couldn't keep up with me physically. I was too much for 2 women to handle. Second, and more importantly, neither of them had gotten pregnant yet. Under Yuzhou law, a man without children could have his property seized and be forced into military service. They'd already seen what the army did to their brother. They couldn't risk losing me. Wan Qing had clearly been thinking about this for a while. She even had a candidate picked out, a childhood friend from the county town. Educated, clever, capable, and still unmarried because she was too proud to settle for an ordinary man. Her family was being harassed by the government for not marrying her off. I tried to wave it away, told them not to worry, that I'd never be dragged into the army regardless. But Wan Qing pulled her sister down, and they both knelt before me. She said they'd already made up their mind and asked permission to write a letter. What could I do? I gave in. Wan Qing got out ink and paper immediately and started writing. That woman was born to be the head wife of a great household. Sharp mind, long-term vision, no jealousy clouding her judgment. When I stepped outside, 4 young men were standing nervously in the yard. Village boys, 16 or 17, waiting to see me. They wanted to become my students, learn hunting, archery, survival. Each had brought a bag of gifts, whatever their poor families could scrape together. One had dried herbs, another some eggs, small precious things. I accepted the gifts, refusing would have insulted them. But I didn't take them as formal disciples. Instead, I gave them spare bows and pre-made traps I had lying around. Not enough to take down big game, but plenty for rabbits and pheasants. The deal? 1/3 of whatever they caught came to me. If they kept it up through winter until spring, the tools became theirs and the tribute rule ended. The smartest of the 4, Li Long, understood immediately. It was basically a free gift with a small test of character attached. They all agreed eagerly. I noticed one of them, Wang Fei, was a bit different. Quick reflexes but calculating eyes. His offering was the cheapest of the 4. A clever opportunist. I'd keep an eye on that one. The bows were simple enough that any villager with basic skills could make them. What I'd never share was the crossbow. That was my true advantage. Too powerful, too accurate, too dangerous to let the technology spread. I handed out the bows, giving the worst one to Wang Fei since I didn't trust him. Each man got 1 arrow, no iron tips, but enough for small game. I wanted to give them a warning about safety, but they were so excited they grabbed the bows and ran off before I could finish a sentence. Inside, Ching'er was sorting through the apprentice gifts. She held up something round and covered in dirt, asking if it was poisonous. After the Xiaofang incident, she was cautious about anything unfamiliar. I looked at it, and my heart nearly stopped. It was a sweet potato. A sweet potato. In this world, this single root could change everything. Sweet potatoes grow fast, produce huge yields, and one plant feeds a family. In my old world, this crop had ended famines and triggered population explosions after a merchant smuggled it into the country. If I could grow these, hunger would become a memory. I scrambled through the bag and found one more, smaller, with tiny sprouts starting to form. Perfect for planting. I told Ching'er to store it somewhere warm and safe. It couldn't freeze over winter. Come spring, we'd plant it and grow seedlings. The smooth one I told her to steam for dinner. She looked skeptical. A dirty ball that tastes good? Sure. I couldn't help myself after that. Between the excitement and Ching'er standing there looking adorable, I pulled her into my arms and carried her to the bedroom. Wan Qing finished her letter, saw what was happening, shook her head. Then I pulled her in too. We didn't get up until late afternoon. First time I'd actually felt tired afterward. The sisters stumbled out with messy hair and flushed faces to cook dinner. When the steamed sweet potato hit the table, Wan Qing took a tiny bite and her eyes went wide. Soft, sweet, unlike anything she'd ever tasted. Ching'er tried it and nearly screamed with delight. I gave them my portion too and stuck with rice porridge. Watching them eat with tears of happiness in their eyes was enough for me. After dinner, I went for a walk around the village. I had plans, buying up land from desperate neighbors who'd pawned their plots and couldn't redeem them. A few coins per deed would do it. A landlord needs land, after all. I barely made it out the gate before the 4 apprentices came stumbling toward me. They were bloody and battered. The worst one had his chest torn open, face shredded, barely alive. They'd gone up the mountain with those flimsy bows and picked a fight with something big. I was furious. The bows I gave them couldn't even kill a civet cat in one shot. What made them think they could take on a large predator? I hadn't even had the chance to warn them, and they'd nearly gotten themselves killed. Idiots. The 4 boys stumbled over each other trying to describe what attacked them. Something that stood up like a man but was big as a mountain. Claws like knives. Their arrows bounced right off. I knew what it was immediately, a bear. A big one. Their wooden arrows couldn't even scratch the thing. A bear's hide is so thick that even a rifle needs to hit the heart dead on to bring it down. I asked who led them into the mountains. Wang Fei. Of course. The reckless one. I looked at Wang Fei more carefully. He was already gone. Chest ripped open, face destroyed. No saving him. He's dead, I told them flatly. Bury him somewhere. As for you 3, your wounds aren't bad. Here's some money. Go to the doctor in the next village. Eat well, and you'll heal in a few days. They tried to argue about Wang Fei. I shut them down. Dead is dead. Then I chewed them out properly. Why didn't they listen? Why did they charge into the mountains like fools? If hunting were easy, their fathers would have done it. Anyone can whittle a bough. That's why nobody in the village hunts with one. Because it's not enough. I threw them 60 coins for medical treatment. They were stunned. More money than they'd ever held. Compared to Wang Changsheng, who docked pay for everything and ignored injuries, I was apparently a saint. Before they left, Wang Dian mentioned the bear was already at the forest edge near the village. That was a serious problem. If it wandered in, people would die, including possibly my wives. I also asked about the sweet potato. Turned out Wang Fei had brought it as his gift. Nobody knew what it was or where exactly he dug it up, but the others pointed me to the general area. Deep in the mountains, a river valley on the opposite side from where I'd hunted the deer. Next morning I geared up and went searching. I followed the valley for hours, found bear droppings and tracks, but no bear. It had moved on, which was a relief, but not a guarantee it wouldn't come back. I decided to push further and crossed over a ridge into another valley. That's when I spotted something dark on the ground ahead. I knocked an arrow and crept forward, expecting the bear. It was a dead horse. Not wild. It had iron shoes and a bridle. Its belly had been torn open by something massive. Organs mostly eaten, flesh gnawed away. Dead about a day. A few steps past the horse, behind a large boulder, lay a dead man. His clothes stopped me cold. Sheepskin vest, cowhide boots. Not the clothing of anyone from the Delhi Empire. This was grassland clothing. Northern barbarian clothing. My brother-in-law's warning echoed in my head. The northern barbarians had reached the Yuzhou border. Their scouts were already operating deep inside our territory. This was one of them. A barbarian scout, killed by the bear along with his horse. The enemy was closer than I'd thought. And if there was one scout in these mountains, there were certainly more. The dead barbarian scout confirmed my worst fears. Winter was coming and the northern tribes would raid Yuzhou for supplies. I wasn't ready. I examined the body closely. The wounds were from animal claws, but the actual cause of death was probably falling from his horse and cracking his skull on the boulder. What worried me more were the hoof prints. Multiple horses, not just one. There were more scouts out here. I tracked the prints upstream to the river's source. A waterfall poured through a crack in a cliff face into a deep pool, surrounded by ancient trees and strange mineral formations. Cave openings dotted the rock face with stalactites hanging inside. Behind a boulder, I found what I was looking for, a black horse tied near a cave entrance, saddled with leather gear, a curved sword and quiver still strapped to its back. If the horse was here, the rider was alive. I set up my crossbow at a hidden position about 500 paces out and waited. A long time. Finally, a man emerged from the cave, short, wearing leather armor. He checked his surroundings carefully, filled his water skin at the pool, and chewed dried mutton. Then he went back inside and came out carrying a corpse. That's when I understood. Including the one I'd found earlier, there were now 3 barbarians. And this man was about to dump the body into the water source. Dead bodies carry disease. Poison the pool, and every river downstream, every village, every town, gets contaminated with plague. These bastards were planning biological warfare. I fired my crossbow. But barbarian scouts trained from childhood to react to arrow sounds. He heard it, and threw the corpse in front of himself as a shield. My bolt punched through the body, but only nicked his neck. Not fatal. He sprinted for his horse. All his weapons were on the saddle. My position was exposed. I climbed a nearby tree with thick branches and hid in the canopy. He came riding down the valley, lying flat against the horse's side to minimize his profile, bow drawn. Smart. But he didn't account for the dense forest. From my elevated position, I could see everything. I wanted him alive. A dead scout was worth nothing compared to the intelligence a live one could provide. The government paid bounties for captured barbarian spies, and the information could save countless lives downstream. I swung down from the tree on a branch, crossbow in one hand. He looked up just in time to see me dropping on him like a demon. I kicked him square in the neck, knocking him off the horse. The impact nearly toppled the animal too. Even stunned, this man was dangerous. He pulled his curved sword mid-fall, incredible reflexes. I came at him with my spear. He rolled away from the first thrust, blocked the second with his blade, then broke into a sprint toward the horse. I switched to my axe and hurled it at his back. He heard it coming and dropped flat. But I'd already predicted that move. I hadn't been aiming to kill. I'd wanted him alive from the start. That's why I didn't finish him from the tree when I had the perfect shot. This was all about capture. The spinning axe handle cracked the barbarian right on the skull. He dropped like a stone. I tied him up tight, then turned my attention to the real prize, his horse. A beautiful animal. Jet black, tall frame, fully equipped with leather saddle, curved sword, and quiver. The horse didn't like me at first, snorting, rearing, trying to resist. I grabbed the reins and yanked hard enough to pull its head down. Then harder. The horse went down on its side. When it stood back up and met my eyes, something clicked. It went quiet and obedient after that. I told it to behave, and it'd eat well, maybe even get a mate. Misbehave, and I'd make it a gelding. I swear it understood, because it looked at the axe dangling near its belly and didn't make another sound. I ate some dried meat from the barbarian's supplies, then loaded the unconscious scout onto the horse and headed home. On the way down, I found the sweet potato patch Wang Fei had stumbled across, dug up everything I could and piled them on the horse too. The poor animal was gasping under the weight, but didn't dare complain. Halfway down the mountain, the barbarian woke up and started cursing, demanding I release him. I asked him how many scouts came with him and what else they were planning besides poisoning the water. He spat at me and said I was dreaming. So I punched him unconscious again. When I emerged from the tree line, Wang Changsheng was in his fields with a dozen workers, repairing the damage from the wild boar attack. They all stopped and stared. A horse, a real horse, was something nobody in this village had ever owned. Horses were military property in the empire. Then they noticed the man tied to the saddle wearing sheepskin boots. The whispers started instantly. A barbarian prisoner, a captured enemy scout. This was a huge deal. Wang Chongqing heard the chatter and lost his temper. But his jealousy was eating him alive. The horse, the bounty for capturing a barbarian spy, the wild boar meat, the hunting. Everything good kept falling into my lap while his own world was crumbling. He was also still furious about his brother sleeping with his wife. He knew that was my doing. I tricked Wang Chongshuan into her bedroom to avoid the situation myself. Since then, the chief had been dragging his brother to the fields every day just to keep the two apart. But he couldn't say anything publicly. Family shame stays in the family. All that anger boiled over at once. He marched up to me and blocked my path. Lu Feng, you're the curse of this village. I stopped the horse and smiled. How so? He unloaded everything. My parents' deaths were somehow my fault. The famine was my fault. Hunting caused the wild boars to attack his fields. Wang Fei's death was my fault for setting a bad example. And the crowning accusation, I'd corrupted his innocent little brother into sleeping with his own sister-in-law, bringing shame upon the Wang family name. I just stood there and let him rant, waiting to see how far he'd take this performance. Wang Chongqing kept ranting, spit flying everywhere. He jabbed his finger at my nose and called me an animal, a curse on the village, blamed me for everything from the famine to his brother's behavior. Then he pulled out his trump card. As village chief, he was banishing me from Siwa village. Effective immediately. Pack up and get out. I laughed. You want me gone? Sounds like you're offering me your position. That sent him into a frenzy. He was convinced now that I'd been scheming to take over as village chief all along. In his twisted logic, I'd tricked his brother into sleeping with his wife to destroy the Wang family's reputation, clearing my path to power. The truth was even simpler than that. When his brother confessed under pressure, Wang Chongqing had beaten his wife bloody and locked her up. He was planning to divorce her before the scandal spread further. In his mind, he'd cleverly uncovered my master plan just in time. I lost patience, pushed him out of my way. He fell into the rice paddy again and started screaming about how he'd saved my life once, how I was ungrateful, how he was the law in this village. I reached behind my back and pulled out my axe. Let the steel catch the light. The moment his eyes met mine, every drop of courage drained out of him. He scrambled away screaming, murder, help, tripping, crawling, running all at once. I watched him go and made a decision. The Wang brothers were a problem that needed solving. Not today. Wang Chongqing was still technically a government-appointed official, and killing him without cause would bring the law down on me. But his brother Wang Chongshuan was a different story. That one had no protection. If he crossed me again, he'd die. What I didn't know was that behind my back, the two brothers were already hatching something vile. Wang Chongshuan, arm still bandaged from when I'd crushed his wrist, whispered his plan to his brother. They knew I'd have to leave for the county town to collect the bounty on the barbarian prisoner. The moment I was gone, they'd break into my house, assault both sisters, then burn the place down with the women inside, use their workers as alibis. No evidence, no witnesses. Wang Chongqing agreed without hesitation. They shook on it. I knew none of this as I walked home feeling good about my day. At the house, Wan Qing was tidying the yard and Qing'er was making porridge with help from Huang Shenyang, a kind older woman from the village. Huang Shenyang wasn't originally from here. She'd fled famine years ago and settled at the foot of the mountain. She'd lost both sons to military conscription and her only daughter to childbirth. With no children left, she'd taken a quiet liking to my two wives. Back when the old Lu Feng was beating them so badly they couldn't get out of bed, it was Huang Shenyang who'd sneak over to care for them, smuggle them food. She probably saved Wan Qing's life during that bout of food poisoning. I was grateful for her. As long as she was willing to help, my wives had someone trustworthy watching over them. I greeted her warmly, tied the horse at the gate, and walked inside. Wan Qing dropped what she was doing and hurried to my side, eyes full of love. Qing'er and Wan Qing had something to ask me. They explained that Huang Shenyang's husband had broken his leg falling while gathering firewood, and the old couple had gone 2 days without food. The sisters wanted to give them some grain. Repayment for all the time Shenyang had secretly cared for them when the old me was beating them senseless. They watched me nervously, big eyes shining, waiting for permission. The fact that they dared ask at all showed how much trust had grown between us. I waved it off. You're my wives. Handle it yourselves. You don't need to ask me for something that small. They nearly cried with gratitude. Such a tiny freedom, but to them it was everything. When San Yang saw the barbarian tied to the horse outside, she screamed and tried to drag the sisters away. I calmed her down and explained the county bounty, 50 taels for a live capture. Then she noticed the horse and got serious. Keeping a military horse was a crime punishable by death. I told her it was a wild horse I'd tamed in the mountains. She didn't buy it, but she had a better idea. She offered to hide the saddle, bridle, and anything else that identified it as a war horse at her place. No evidence at my house meant no conviction. Wanqing saw through San Yang's real motive immediately. By holding that evidence, the old woman was creating insurance for herself. If I ever turned bad again, she had leverage. And if I stayed good, she'd proven her loyalty and bound our fates together. Either way, she came out ahead. It was clever. I respected it. I agreed without argument and moved the horse to our backyard near the hillside where nobody would spot it easily. It was too late to make the trip to the county town, so I stashed the prisoner, hid the sweet potatoes, and sat down to dinner with my wives. Boiled wild boar and vegetable porridge. I couldn't keep my eyes off them while they ate. The way Qing'er's lips moved around each bite of meat. The way Wanqing's chest rose and fell as she leaned over her bowl. They caught me staring and turned bright red, ducking their faces into their bowls. I told them to eat well. They'd need the energy tonight. Wanqing surprised me with a playful comeback, then blushed so hard she couldn't believe she'd said it. This quiet, dignified woman was loosening up. After dinner, I told them to boil a big pot of water. They had no idea why, but they did it. The only large container we had was a wooden tub the village carpenter had made for skinning game. It was cramped with both sisters squeezed in, but it worked for now. I made a mental note to order a bigger bathing tub tomorrow, one that could fit all three of us. When they finished washing, Wanqing appeared in the bedroom doorway, holding her clothes against herself, still half wet. Husband, I'm ready. I had plans for tonight that would require some teaching. My wives were eager students, and there were things they'd never heard of. Tonight's lesson was long overdue. That night was unforgettable. I taught both sisters things they'd never imagined possible. Wanqing was hesitant at first, but followed my guidance. Qing'er needed no convincing. By the time I was finally satisfied, they were both completely spent. I left before dawn with the barbarian tied to the ox cart. Told Wanqing to have Huang Xinyang stay with them while I was gone. The sisters refused to have any man guarding them while I was away. The prisoner had been faking sleep, waiting for a chance to attack me when the cart turned a corner. I broke his arm for that. No more tricks after that. At the city gate, everything changed. Previous trips had been simple, a quick check going in, nothing going out. But the moment the guards spotted the barbarian, they surrounded me with weapons drawn. After I explained myself, they escorted me directly to the county magistrate's office. Mu Xiaoyang met me there, grinning with admiration. He couldn't believe I'd captured a barbarian scout alive. He walked me through the process, hand the prisoner to the jailer, get a receipt, collect the bounty from the clerk. 50 taels, more than he earned in 2 or 3 years as a constable. I flattered him a bit, told him his martial skills were probably good enough to take on several barbarian scouts at once. He ate it up, waving his hands modestly. The truth was his fighting ability was nothing special, but keeping my brother-in-law happy was worth a few compliments. The dungeon doors creaked open, and out walked the county jailer, Chen Dianyu. The man was enormous. I had to look up to meet his eyes. He was twice my size, built like a mountain of muscle, with a giant saber at his waist and eyes sharp as a tiger's. He'd been a butcher before the army drafted him. On the battlefield, he'd fought like a madman, racked up kills, and nearly died from his wounds. When he miraculously survived, they gave him this post. Word was he'd have been a general, if not for his injuries. He lifted the barbarian off the cart with one hand, like picking up a chicken. Confirmed it was genuine. A northern barbarian, no question. Then he turned those tiger eyes on me. You know that collaborating with the enemy is punishable by death in our empire? In Yuzhou, it's death by 1,000 cuts. He was testing me, trying to see if I'd crumble. Maybe even planning to pocket the bounty himself. I met his stare without flinching. Are you saying I didn't catch this man? Or that I don't have the ability? Or are you accusing me of being a spy? Mu Xiaoyang nearly fainted behind me. He was sweating bullets, Sure, I'd just sign my own death warrant by talking back to the most dangerous man in the county. Chen Dianyu could crush anyone in this city in a fight. Nobody dared challenge him. But I'd read men like him my whole career. Warriors respect courage. They despise groveling. Chen Dianyu stared at me for a long moment. Then, instead of anger, something like surprise crossed his face. Chen Dianyu was confident no one could withstand his presence. Every constable in the building walked with their heads down around him. But I didn't flinch, and that confused him. He decided to test me, called for the head constable, Wang Butu, and said if I couldn't beat this man in a fight, there was no way I'd captured a barbarian scout. No proof, no bounty. I almost laughed. I hadn't come here for the money. I'd brought the prisoner so they could interrogate him and get intelligence that might save lives. I told Chen Dianyu to keep his silver. I wasn't going to perform like a circus animal to prove myself. That threw him off completely. He'd expected me to beg or bluster. Instead, I was walking away from 50 taels like it was pocket change. He couldn't figure me out. The constable arrived, medium build, scar between his eyebrows, swagger in his step. He grabbed a punishment stick from the wall and without warning flicked one at me. I caught it midair with one hand. That got his attention. Chen Dianyu whispered to his man, "Don't hold back, but don't kill him." We circled each other. The constable struck first, a hard overhead swing. I sidestepped, blocked, then swept low. He stumbled back, already losing initiative. He switched techniques, turning his staff into a spear thrust, then reversed into a smash. The sudden change almost caught me, but his power was spent in the transition. I didn't even dodge, just braced my stick and pushed back. His own weapon rebounded into his face. One more strike from me, and he was on the ground, unconscious. The whole fight lasted seconds. The room went silent. Every constable took a step backward. Chen Dianyu stood up slowly, eyes gleaming. "I was wrong about you. I never expected to find someone like you in a backwater village." Then he offered me a job. Join the county office. Work under him. With my skills, he said, I'd be invaluable. Mu Xiaoyang nearly tripped over himself rushing to my side, begging me to accept. In his eyes, this was a golden opportunity. Government rice bowl, steady pay, status. He'd had to spend serious money and use his father's connections just to get his own position. Here it was being handed to me for free. I turned it down. "Thank you, but I'm just a village hunter. I don't have that kind of ambition." Chen Dianyu's face darkened. Nobody refused his personal invitation. Mu Xiaoyang looked like he wanted to strangle me. He started apologizing to Chen Dianyu on my behalf, calling me an idiot blinded by pig dung. But I knew what I wanted. A constable's salary couldn't match what I earned in a single hunting trip. Even Chen Dianyu's own position didn't tempt me. I had 2 beautiful wives at home, land to farm, a village to build up, and plans bigger than any county office could contain. Why would I trade that freedom to take orders from someone else? Mu Xiaoyang was furious with me. He even kicked my leg. He said this was a once-in-a-lifetime chance, a government job, move to the city, give his sisters a better life. I told him everyone has their own path, and to stop pushing. Just then a clerk rushed over and whispered to Chen Dianyu that the county magistrate's nephew was arriving soon to fill a position. The message was clear. Even if I'd accepted, the spot was already promised to someone with connections. Chen Dianyu cursed about politics, but had no choice. He signed my papers with a nod of respect and told me to collect my bounty. I liked the man. Rough, honest, powerful. The kind of warrior I'd want under my command someday, if I ever built something worth commanding. I filed him away in my memory and left with 50 taels. On the road home, I spotted Tian Laoba standing at the crossroads looking panicked. "Something happened at your house," he said. My blood went cold. I jumped off the cart and sprinted home. The yard was wrecked. Huang Shenyang lay on the ground, face bloody, hair wild. My 2 wives were crouched beside her, shaking with terror. And tied up in the corner, beaten and gagged, was Wang Changshuan. The story came together in seconds. The brothers had executed their plan. The moment I left for the county town, Wang Changshuan broke in. He tried to drag the sisters away. Huang Shenyang fought him with everything she had, an old woman against a grown man, and took a savage beating with a wooden stick to protect them. Tian Lao Ba and his 2 men arrived just in time while delivering wood, heard the commotion, and overpowered Wang Changshuan. My wives threw themselves into my arms, sobbing. Their wrists were raw from rope burns. Their hands were cut. If San Yang hadn't been there, If the three men had come a few minutes later, I couldn't think about it. I checked Sen Yang. Blood at the corner of her mouth, pale complexion, possible internal injuries. I gave Tian Lao Ba 2 taels of silver and told him to take her to the doctor in the next village immediately. He tried to refuse, too much money. I didn't let him finish the sentence. Then I picked up the bloody stick from the ground, the same one I used to mix cattle feed. I told the sisters to go inside. They didn't need to see what came next. Wang Changshuan saw me coming and went insane with fear. He writhed on the ground like a worm, trying to crawl away, muffled screams leaking through the rags stuffed in his mouth. He'd already wet himself. A trail of filth followed him across the yard. I stepped on his back and pinned him flat. First strike, the stick cracked across his skull. Blood exploded outward. Second strike. He went limp, head split open like a red gourd. But that was too easy. You think I'd let you die that quick? I aimed the stick between his legs and brought it down with everything I had. The crunch echoed across the yard. Wang Changshuan's scream cut through the entire village when the stick landed between his legs. He writhed on the ground, howling. I looked up at the blue sky, then brought the stick down on his skull. Blood and bone flew apart. You did this to yourself. Touch my women. This is what happens. He was still breathing. Half his eye socket caved in. I asked him which hand he'd used to tie my wives with rope. Then I took the axe off my belt and chopped it off. He screamed again. I took the other hand too. Then his eyes, the ones that had looked at my wives. Then both legs, the ones that had walked into my yard. By the time the screaming stopped, there wasn't much left of him. An hour later, what remained of Wang Changshuan was propped against the crooked tree by the village river for everyone to see. Hands hanging from the branches. Legs tossed to the side. Empty eye sockets staring at nothing. A kneeling corpse with no limbs, like a monster's confession. Wang Changxing rushed over with his workers the moment he heard. One look at his brother's remains, and he fainted. His men wanted to run, but couldn't leave their unconscious boss behind. They had to pinch his pressure points until he bled before he came to. He stared at the body and swore revenge through his tears. Back home, I cleaned up the yard and went inside. The sisters were sitting on the bed, calm. Wanqing had become almost unshakable after everything she'd been through. Qinger had built up her tolerance too. They'd already recovered from the shock. I pulled out 2 oil paper packages from behind my back, roast chickens from the county town. Their eyes lit up. They hadn't eaten roast chicken since they'd lived with their parents. Over dinner, Wanqing asked quietly if she and her sister were burdens to me. They felt too weak, always needing rescue. I pulled them both close and told them the truth. Anyone who hurt them was my enemy, simple as that. What I did to Wang Changshuan wasn't just revenge. It was a message to every person in this village. Harm my wives while I'm away, and death will be the kindest part of what comes next. Qinger asked if our future children would be as strong as me. I laughed and said they'd be beautiful like their mothers and handsome like me. I'd teach them to fight, and the sisters would teach them to read. Then I carried them both to bed. It wasn't even dark yet, and they protested weakly, but their bodies told a different story. An hour of passion later, we lay tangled together in the fading light. Wanqing asked what would happen if Wang Changxing reported his brother's death to the authorities. I told her not to worry. Nobody could prove I killed him. But there was plenty of evidence, witnesses, injuries, proving Wang Changshuan had broken into our home and attacked them. If Wang Changxing went to the law, he'd be charged as an accomplice for enabling his brother. He'd lose his position as village chief. He was smart enough to know that. He wouldn't report anything. This killing wasn't impulse. It was strategy, a warning to everyone, and the first move in my plan to take control of the village, one land deed at a time. Siwa village would become mine. Wang Changsheng was a tumor on this village. As long as he held power, my plans would always face resistance. The workers who depended on him for food could be turned against me at any moment. He had to go eventually, but not yet. The next morning I was doing my exercises in the yard, 400 push-ups to start, the same brutal routine from my mercenary days. That's when Wang Jian, Zhang Hongda, and Li Long showed up again, looking beat up as usual. Li Long was limping. These 3 idiots had gone back into the mountains without permission. They wanted revenge for Wang Fei's death. They hadn't found the bear, but they'd stumbled across something worse, a white-browed tiger. It was wounded, long slash marks on its body, probably knife wounds. They'd tried to fight it and nearly died, only survived by climbing trees. The good news was they'd spotted the tiger's den. I scolded them hard, confiscated their bows as punishment, and told them they'd get them back once each man made 20 arrows that passed my inspection. They were devastated but accepted it. I explained that wanting revenge for a friend showed good character, but charging in without the skills to survive was just suicide. The knife wounds on the tiger connected to the dead barbarian scouts I'd found earlier. The timeline made sense. The barbarians had fought the tiger, which killed 2 of them and their horse, but took serious damage itself. Now it was dragging prey back to its den, which meant one thing: cubs. Tigers normally eat where they kill. The only reason to haul food home is babies. I headed into the mountains before noon. Had to be back by dark. The days were getting shorter. Within an hour, I found the den. Blood trails and drag marks led to a cave entrance. I could hear faint sounds from inside, the low cries of young tigers. I didn't rush in. I gathered dry branches, scraped pine resin off nearby trees, wrapped it all together into torches, made a spare, and prepared my crossbow. Then I entered. The smell hit me first, blood, then rot, getting worse the deeper I went. At a drop-off inside the cave, I peered down into the main chamber. The tiger lay in a nest of grass, barely alive. Its entire body was stained red with blood, covered in wounds. It sensed me and tried to growl, but couldn't even stand. It was finished. I dropped into the den. The dead horse from the barbarian scout was there, reeking. And next to it, 2 tiger cubs, tiny, maybe 3 months old, were tearing at the horse meat, struggling to chew with their small teeth. An idea hit me immediately. If I raised these cubs, they'd grow into the ultimate guard animals. I remembered reading about a famous general who'd tamed tigers and rode them into battle. The sight alone would send enemy horses into a panic. Imagine riding a full-grown tiger onto a battlefield against the northern barbarians. The psychological impact would be devastating. I was going to raise tigers. The thought alone made me grin like an idiot. The mother tiger saw me reaching for her cubs and let out a furious roar. Somehow she found the strength to stand, blood dripping from every wound, legs shaking, eyes locked on mine. I raised the crossbow at her forehead, but she collapsed after just a few seconds. It was pure willpower, nothing more. I lowered the weapon. This tiger had killed 2 barbarian scouts and given me a prisoner and a horse. She'd earned something from me. I told her I wouldn't kill her. She was dying anyway, but her cubs wouldn't survive alone in these mountains. I offered a deal. Let me take them, and I'd raise them well. When she growled once, I took it as agreement. Then she clawed weakly toward the dead horse and back toward her cubs. She was worried they'd go hungry. That hit me harder than I expected. Even a wild beast becomes selfless as a mother. It also made me think practically. Tigers eat enormous amounts of meat. As they grew, feeding them would become a real problem. I couldn't hunt enough to sustain 2 adult tigers on top of everything else. So I made one more request. I told her I'd need to sell her body after she died. The meat, the bones, the organs. The money would go toward feeding her children. But I'd keep her hide as a mark of respect. She stared at me with something complicated in her eyes, then growled once more. I sat beside her and waited. About half an hour later, she died quietly. I felt genuine respect for this animal, dragging prey home on destroyed legs just to feed her young one last time. I built a wooden sled outside the cave, loaded her body onto it, over 400 gene. Cut another 200 gene of usable meat from the horse carcass. The 2 cubs were small, maybe 3 months old, still chewing clumsily on scraps. They didn't fight when I placed them on the sled. I covered them with broad leaves so nobody in the village would see what I was carrying. It was fully dark by the time I got home. The sisters came running out like butterflies, each grabbing one side of the sled to help pull. I kept quiet about the cubs on purpose. When Wanqing pulled back the leaves and saw 2 round furry heads staring up at her, she screamed and jumped backward. Chinger shrieked too. Then they saw me grinning and realized what I'd done. You could have warned us, Chinger scolded, slapping dust off her clothes. But curiosity quickly won over fear. Sister, they're actually cute. Cute until they eat someone, Wanqing shot back. The cubs were dazed from the bumpy ride, blinking their dark little eyes at the 2 women. I told the sisters we'd keep them in the house for now. They were small enough to wander around inside. If they misbehaved, smack them. The sisters stared at me like I was insane. Hit a tiger? I demonstrated. Grabbed one cub by the scruff and lifted it. The little beast went wild, claws slashing the air, fangs bared. I punched it once, not too hard. It calmed down a little, but still snarled. Second punch, it went completely limp and docile, dangling in my hand without a sound. Lesson learned. Ching'er snatched the cub from me immediately, pressing its fuzzy body against her cheek. Don't worry, little one. We won't let him bully you. Wan Qing grabbed the other one, just as fast. Both women hurried inside, cooing at the cubs like they were kittens, shooting me dirty looks over their shoulders. I shook my head and laughed. 2 tiger cubs, a horse, an ox, chickens, 2 beautiful wives, and a growing pile of silver. Not bad for a dead man living in someone else's body. Women and their pets. The sisters were already treating those cubs like babies. I built a simple pen inside the house, then spent half the night butchering the tiger by lamplight. The hide was too valuable to sell. In this era, tiger skin was a status symbol. I'd use it as a bed cover. Warm and impressive. I organized all my scattered silver into a chest under the bed. Tomorrow I'd collect land deeds from every family in the village and make a trip to the county to sell the tiger meat and bones while redeeming every pawned plot of land I could. That night the 3 of us went at it until I couldn't move. The sisters were getting skilled, lasting longer, learning new things. Too skilled, actually. I didn't wake up until the sun was pouring through the window. The cubs had already been fed. The funny thing was they'd bonded instantly with the sisters, snuggling up to them, perfectly gentle. The moment they saw me, they froze and went quiet. Smart animals. They knew who hit and who cuddled. I named them. The female had white stripes, bye-bye. The male was hot-tempered, hua-hua. After breakfast, I went door to door through the village buying up pawn tickets. Families had been selling their land to survive for years. 1 or 2 taels per acre, pawned to shops in town with no hope of ever buying it back. I offered to take the tickets off their hands at the same price. In just one morning, I collected over 30 tickets from a dozen families. Most of the land was poor hillside plots, hard to farm without modern irrigation. But quantity had its own value, and I was already thinking about how to use the village river for water systems. Then I came to a stretch of prime land by the river, about 10 acres, overgrown but obviously fertile. The weeds alone grew thick and tall. It belonged to a recluse, an old man past 80 who lived alone on a hilltop behind the village. Wang Changsheng had been trying to get that land for years without success. He was probably just waiting for the old man to die. I decided to visit him now, before Wang Changsheng could make his move. The path up was lined with chrysanthemums in full autumn bloom. At the top, a small courtyard filled with flowers and drying medicinal herbs. The old man sat there sipping tea, humming to himself. Before I even stepped through the gate, he spoke. Choosing to retire in Siwa village was the best decision I ever made. Don't you agree? I stopped. Was he talking to me? He couldn't even see me yet. He continued. Years ago, I predicted that Yuzhou would produce someone extraordinary, a man who'd shake the heavens. And here you are. You're about 24, I believe. I walked in slowly, stunned. I didn't even know my own exact age in this body, but his guess matched the memories I'd inherited. I'd never believed in fortune-telling or mystical geomancy. This old man was known throughout the area as a feng shui master. Even people from the county town came seeking his guidance. Rumor said he came from a famous divination family and had retreated here to escape the world. Maybe there was more to this old man than superstition. He'd known I was coming, known my age, and spoken of someone who'd change Yozhou's fate. Whether it was real insight or just a sharp old mind reading patterns, I wanted to hear more. The old man already knew who I was. He said a village widow had mentioned me that morning, and he'd cast a divination predicting I'd visit today. Without small talk, he pointed to an ornate box by the door and told me to take it. Inside were property deeds and land titles for all his holdings, including those prime 10 acres by the river. There was also a strange silk pouch with something hard inside. When I tried to open it, he stopped me. He said he'd found it years ago and didn't know exactly what it was, only that it could save a life. Never open it, he warned, unless you're truly facing death. His only request was that when he died, I bury him on the slope behind his house, facing northwest. No name on the tombstone, just a stone. I bowed deeply and promised to bring him food every day for the rest of his life. He waved me off like it was nothing and shuffled inside for a nap. A strange old man. Impossible to read. But I'd gotten the land, and I'd keep my word. I spent the rest of the morning collecting more pawn tickets around the village, then loaded the ox cart with tiger meat and headed for the county town. In total, I had over 40 tickets representing roughly 100 acres. Combined with the old man's riverfront property, this would make me the biggest private landholder in Siwa village after Wang Chongqing. At the pawn shop, the only one in the county, a grand old establishment that had been bleeding poor farmers for generations. The clerk recognized me from the old days and looked down his nose. But rules were rules. Customers are kings. I tested the waters with one small ticket first. Half an acre, originally pawned for 700 coins. The clerk's abacus clattered and he came back smiling. One tael, 8 coins of silver. More than double the original amount. Compound interest, he said cheerfully. Standard policy. I did the math in my head. Redeeming all 100 acres would cost 3 to 500 taels. Highway robbery. But the money was gambling house silver anyway. Easy come, easy go. I slapped the entire stack of tickets on the counter. Calculate all of these. I'm redeeming everything today. The clerk's face cycled through shock, panic, and then something cold. The shop owner had standing orders to block large redemptions by any means necessary. Land that stayed unredeemed became the shop's property, their real profit source. The clerk snatched the tickets and in one swift motion ripped the entire stack to shreds. I couldn't believe it. The counter was too high for me to have stopped him. What tickets? He said with a smirk, backing away. You never gave me anything. This is a respectable business. Causing trouble here won't end well for you. Before I could respond, he shouted for help. 7 men with wooden clubs emerged from both sides and surrounded me. I gave the clerk one last chance. Pay up, hand over the deeds. Everyone walks away happy. He laughed in my face, called me a nobody, and ordered his thugs to attack. Bad decision. I pulled my axe, dodged the first swing, took one man's arm off, grabbed his stick, and sent the rest of them flying in seconds. Then I walked outside, planted the stick on the front steps, and addressed the growing crowd. I told them everything. How I'd come with legitimate pawn tickets, how the clerk destroyed them and tried to have me killed. Then I asked the crowd a simple question. How many of you have been cheated by this place? The dam burst. One man had lost 3 acres he was promised he could redeem. Another's grandfather's heirloom box was sold before the agreed deadline. A woman's dying mother's bracelets, pawned to feed hungry children, had been flipped to a rich man's concubine within weeks. I stoked the fire. Are we going to keep letting them rob us? We have hands. We have feet. What are we waiting for? Go in and take back what's ours. I vaulted over the counter using my stick, kicked through the wooden barrier, grabbed the clerk who'd torn up my tickets, forced him to reveal where the land deeds were stored, then killed him quietly. He was the only person in there who could identify me. With him gone, nothing connected me to any of this. To draw the crowd inside, I threw fistfuls of loose silver from the counter out into the street. People swarmed in like a flood. While they fought over coins and beat up the remaining guards, I slipped into the back, found the vault, and took every land deed that belonged to Siwa village. The shop owner came running from the back rooms, screaming at his staff. He charged into the stampede and got trampled. I doubt he survived. By the time the constables arrived, led by the same Wang Butu I'd knocked out days earlier, the crowd had scattered. Nobody talked. Everyone had gotten something, and nobody wanted to give it back. The shop workers were either dead or too broken to give statements. The authorities sealed the building and started an investigation that would go nowhere. I watched it all from a tea house across the street, sipping tea calmly. After things settled, I took the tiger bones to a pharmacy. The owner confirmed they were genuine and bought 1 bone at a premium, but said the rest was too much for his small shop. He recommended selling them in Tianyong City, a major trading hub further up the road toward the provincial capital. The journey was long and dangerous. Bandits, war zones, uncertainty. The pharmacist gave me a letter of introduction and pointed me toward the only escort agency in the county, the E-Escort Service, based in the south of town. They had connections along the route and a perfect track record, never lost a shipment. If anyone could get me and my goods to Tianyong City safely, it was them. The Dai E-Escort Agency was impressive, a huge gate with a banner, horses in the yard, dozens of fighters training in formation. I felt a pang of envy. If I had a cavalry unit like that, I'd be unstoppable. The guards at the gate perked up when they saw me. Business had dried up since the border wars cut off the western routes. A paying customer was a godsend. I told them I needed to ship something valuable and would only discuss details with their boss. When I showed them the tiger bones, their eyes nearly fell out. They knew instantly this shipment was worth thousands of taels and hustled me inside. In the training yard, a woman was drilling the fighters with a spear. She stopped me in my tracks. Tall, athletic, curves that her purple combat outfit did nothing to hide. She moved like water with that spear, fluid, precise, deadly. Her face was sun-kissed from years on the road, sharp features, clear fierce eyes. No makeup, no need for any. The kind of beauty that hits you like a fist. She noticed me staring and didn't appreciate it. Without warning, she thrust her spear straight at my face. The tip stopped a centimeter from the spot between my eyes. I didn't flinch, didn't blink, just smiled. Some nerve, she said coldly, then realized I was a client and got flustered trying to recover her composure. When she saw the tiger skeleton on my card, she launched into an interrogation. What weapon did I use? Where did I find it? How long did the hunt take? She clearly didn't believe someone my age could solo a tiger. Her escort team of over a dozen men had failed to bring one down 2 years ago. I told her I was here to do business, not answer questions. She got angry and blocked my path, claiming she needed to verify the goods weren't stolen. This woman's chest was extraordinary, but her brain seemed to have migrated there entirely. She was the most stubborn, suspicious person I'd met since arriving in this world. A guard pulled her aside and tried to calm her down, but she wouldn't let it go. Then a commanding voice cut through the argument. "You error, how dare you be rude to a guest?" A distinguished middle-aged man strode out from the main hall, square jaw, black mustache, the bearing of a man who'd spent decades escorting dangerous cargo through bandit country. This was Wu Santong, the chief escort. Beside him was a thin, slightly hunched man with sharp, intelligent eyes, their strategist, Master Ji. Wu Santong apologized for his daughter's behavior and introduced himself properly. When I explained the shipment, a complete tiger skeleton, the two men exchanged a glance of barely contained excitement. A full set of tiger bones was the kind of job that came along once in a lifetime. "Rest assured," Wu Santong said, "we have connections with every major medicine house in Tianyong City. We'll get you the best price. However, there's the matter of our commission. We agreed on commission terms quickly." Wu Santong was a professional. He understood that pushing a client for details about where their goods came from was bad for business. Take the job, charge accordingly, deliver results. While the strategist Master Ji went to appraise the tiger bones, Wu Santong's daughter came storming back over. He cut her off with a wave before she could say a word and apologized to me for her behavior. I couldn't resist. I caught her eye and gave her a look, a deliberate, cocky stare. She nearly exploded, stamped her feet, fuming. I turned my back on her to check on the appraisal. She snapped. Her whip came out of nowhere, fast as lightning, aimed to kill. I'd been expecting it. A girl with that temper wasn't going to hold back after being provoked. I flicked my axe off my belt and sent it spinning. It caught the whip midair, wrapped around it, and pinned the whole thing to a wooden pillar. The whip was ripped clean from her hand. The entire courtyard went silent. Wu Santong's jaw dropped. His daughter stood there staring at her empty palm, stunned. Every fighter in the yard had just watched me disarm their best with a single throw. Then she said something that made the whole place gasp. "Father, I want a martial arts marriage contest. Right now." She wanted to fight me for the right to marry me. Wu Santong nearly had a stroke. He tried to talk her down. I was a nobody farmer, already married. She'd be a third wife at best. He had plans for her to marry the county magistrate's son. She was 18 and still unmarried, which was already costing the family a fortune in fines under Yuzhou law. Every suitor he'd picked, she'd rejected. She didn't care about any of it. Third wife? Fine. A farmer? She'd seen my skills and knew a man like me wouldn't stay unknown forever. She wanted someone who could match her, and nobody in this entire county had come close until today. Master Ji watched the whole scene with barely hidden amusement. "Excuse me," he asked me politely. "Are you married?" "2 wives already," I said. Wu Santong seized on it. "See? You'd be third. Think about our family's reputation. Third is fine," she shot back without blinking. "What matters is the man, not the number. Or are you worried I can't give him sons?" I had to give her credit. This girl had fire, brains, and zero concern for convention. I liked her more with every word she spoke. Wu Santong was sputtering, blaming his wife for spoiling her. The daughter ignored him completely, announced she was going to fetch the family's treasured bow, and laid down the challenge. If I could draw it, she'd fight me. Her father had apparently promised years ago that any man who could pull that bow would earn his daughter's hand. She turned at the doorway and looked straight at me. Hey, you don't disappoint me. Disappointed? Who said I agreed to marry you? Don't flatter yourself. That stopped her cold. The entire courtyard went quiet. Wu Santong almost choked. She recovered fast. What? Am I not pretty enough? She thrust her chest forward and struck a pose. Are these not big enough? Is this not round enough? Wu Santong's face turned the color of iron. Other men's daughters were modest and refined. His was selling herself on a street corner. I looked her over honestly. She was stunning, sharp features, explosive figure, easily as beautiful as my wife's back home. Pretty sure. And yes, impressively large. But what good is that? I'm not some puppet you can bully into marriage. And I don't keep decorations around me. Decoration? She was fuming. I can fight. I can read. I can do anything. And marrying me comes with benefits you can't imagine. Like what? Marry me, and the entire escort agency is yours. Wu Santong looked like he was having a seizure. His daughter was giving away his life's work before she'd even left the house. Not a warm jacket, a leaky vest with holes in it. But I thought about it seriously. A wife who could fight meant my family would be protected when I wasn't home. A wife who came with an escort agency. Dozens of experienced fighters with connections across the region. That was a strategic asset money couldn't easily buy. Fine. Go get the bow. She bounced away like a happy rabbit. Wu Santong glared at me with undisguised hostility. Meanwhile, Master Ji finished his appraisal. The tiger bones were high quality, worth at least 3,000 taels, though the missing skin and one claw reduced the value slightly. He quoted a 10% commission, 300 taels. That stung. But then he added something interesting. If I could draw the family bow, the fee dropped to 100. If I beat the daughter in combat, it would be free. The old fox was testing me. If I couldn't draw the bow, the goods were probably stolen, and the higher fee covered their risk. I told him I'd pay the full 300 regardless. The extra 200 could count as a bride price. That got Wu Santong's attention. Nobody paid bride prices anymore. The empire's population crisis had eliminated the custom entirely. Girls were practically given away for free. 200 taels in wedding money was unheard of generosity. He looked at me differently after that. Not warmly, but with grudging respect. The daughter returned carrying an ornate black wooden case. Inside lay a magnificent bow, dark red, gleaming with oil, exquisitely crafted. Wu Santong introduced it formally. The wave breaker, a family heirloom. Mulberry wood core, layered with aged wild ox horn and wrapped entirely in deer sinew. 5-stone draw weight. Effective range of 500 paces. 5 stones was monstrous. Most battlefield bows topped out at 2 or 3. This was a training tool designed to build superhuman strength, not a weapon for actual combat. You'd exhaust yourself after a single draw. I picked it up, hooked 2 fingers on the string, and pulled. The bow groaned and vibrated like struck metal. I got halfway. The crowd held their breath. Wu Santong watched with narrow eyes. His daughter was practically bouncing on her toes. I strained. 2 stones. The bow barely bent further. In my old body, this would have been child's play. But this malnourished frame, despite weeks of training and good food, simply didn't have the raw power yet. Was this really my limit right now? The escort fighters started whispering. 2 stones is still impressive, better than most of us could do, but it's not enough. That girl's temper would break any husband anyway. Wu Santong exhaled with visible relief. His daughter's face fell, confused, almost hurt. She'd been so certain I could do it. Wu Santong laughed with relief, saying nobody in the entire county could draw that bow, and I shouldn't feel bad. He'd trained 20 years and still couldn't pull it to full draw. I said nothing. That first attempt was pure brute force, just a test to measure my current strength. Drawing a bow like that required technique, not just muscle. The daughter tried goading me, called me a coward, asked if I was afraid of a girl. Then she switched tactics, grabbed my arm, turned sweet, offered to make me tea and let me rest before trying again. I didn't need rest. It's just a bow. I took a deep breath, channeled everything I had. Not raw power this time, but focused, directed force. The bow groaned. The string vibrated, and it bent all the way to full draw. Wu Santong's smile froze on his face like it had been carved in stone. His daughter lit up like the sun. I let the string down slowly and handed the bow back. Nice weapon. What happens next? Wu Santong was speechless. His daughter answered for him. The real fight wouldn't happen today. When winter came and the rivers froze, she'd set up a public martial arts contest in Tianyong City. I was to show up and compete for her hand. I was annoyed. I'd expected to settle things now, but she was firm. She placed the bow back in its case, tucked it under her arm, and practically skipped away, glowing with happiness. You'd better come, she called back. Don't you dare break your promise. Master Ji patted my shoulder with an amused look and led me to sign the shipping contract. He arranged 12 elite escorts, 5 decoy wagons with the real cargo hidden separately, and Wu Santong himself leading the convoy. The daughter wanted to go, but was ordered to stay and guard the agency while the best fighters were away. I paid the deposit, left my contact information, and headed out. Wu Ziang walked me all the way to the street, clearly reluctant to let me go. That's where I bumped into Mu Xiaoyang, looking like the world was ending. The pawn shop raid had reached the county magistrate's ears. Turns out the shop was the magistrate's personal property, run by one of his many nephews. Now every constable in the county was working the case, and the magistrate wanted blood. My brother-in-law slumped onto my ox cart and vented. No leads, no witnesses willing to talk. Everyone in that mob had gotten free silver and wasn't about to snitch. The ringleader had vanished without a trace. Worst of all, someone had stolen the account books, which meant they couldn't even catalog what was missing. That someone was me. The ledger was under my seat cushion at that very moment. I'd deliberately taken only the land deeds, paper documents impossible to trace, and left the jewelry and valuables for the crowd. Gold has origins. Land deeds are just paper. Nobody could connect them to the robbery. But this conversation told me something important. I couldn't register those deeds yet. With the magistrate's people investigating, showing up with a stack of land titles from the destroyed pawn shop would be suicide. I'd wait until spring planting when the case had gone cold. I told Xiaoyang to come visit the sisters when he had time off. He perked up and asked for a favor, some of my dear blood wine. He gave me that look every young married man gives when he's thinking about impressing his wife. I understood completely and promised to send him a jar. Back home, I put away the land deeds and started planning the real work, building a brick kiln. I'd already picked the spot, an unused piece of wasteland near the mountain slope with a stream running beside it. Perfect for digging clay and hauling water. The kiln would be carved into a steep bank the old-fashioned way. Dig down from above, open the firing mouth below. The process was straightforward but labor-intensive. Mix river mud with yellow clay, dry it, sift out stones, soak it, then stomp it barefoot into thick paste. Shape the bricks, load the kiln, and fire it for 4 or 5 days straight without letting the flame die. With enough hands, one batch took about half a month. With just a few people, it'd take a year. I needed at least 2 batches before the ground froze solid. Not enough for a full house, but enough for a heated sleeping platform and other essentials. The house itself would be timber-framed with earth walls, good enough to survive winter. Next morning, I had Tian Laoba round up every able body in the village. Men, women, didn't matter. 10 coins a day plus meals. Work starts immediately. Wang Chongxing woke up that morning to find not a single one of his hired workers had shown up. Every last one had gone to work for me. He was livid, grabbed 2 servants and marched over to see what I was doing, convinced I was burning through money to steal his position. When he arrived, the site was already buzzing. One team was digging the kiln pit. Another was hauling river mud. Women were gathering firewood. He took one look and burst out laughing. He'd figured out I was making bricks. In his mind, this was a losing business. Mud bricks were too cheap for rich people and too expensive for poor people. My small kiln could produce maybe 5,000 per batch, barely 10 taels worth a month. After paying all those workers and feeding them, I'd be losing money. And there was no market for mud bricks anywhere nearby. He sat down in a chair his servant brought, sipping tea from a purple clay pot, and watched my operation like it was free entertainment. Every hour I spent money was an hour closer to my ruin, in his mind. 4 days later, the kiln was finished. The first 5,000 brick molds went in. I split the crews, some feeding the fire, some making the next batch, some cutting timber in the mountains. The best logs went to my house site. The rest became fuel. Wang Chongxing kept visiting, lounging in his chair, counting my expenses with a smug smile. He was absolutely certain I'd go broke. Then one of his servants mentioned that I was also building at my property. The old yard had been torn down completely. Walls demolished, ground leveled, foundations dug. A proper stone-paved path. The old tree at the entrance turned into a landscaped feature surrounded by a flower bed. New fencing with a main gate and a side gate. Under a new shed, the ox and cart were sheltered. Beside it, a bamboo chicken coop held birds that had already grown to the size of rice bowls. Wang Chongsheng jumped out of his chair and ran to see for himself. What he found was no longer a broken-down shack. It was the beginning of a compound. He had no idea that while he sat counting my pennies, I was building something he couldn't even imagine. While I was busy at the kiln, Wang Chongsheng was snooping around my property. He'd noticed the large shed in the back, the one I'd built extra sturdy with thick log pillars. He couldn't see inside, so the fool climbed a tree to peek over the wall. He saw the horse. The black barbarian war horse I was supposed to have turned in with the prisoner. His face went white with terror and excitement. In his mind, he'd just found the evidence to destroy me. Hiding a military horse was a crime punishable by execution of the entire family. He was so shaken he snapped a branch and fell out of the tree. Wan Qing heard the noise from the yard, but by the time she called out, he was already hobbling away with his servants, clutching his bruised backside and muttering threats. Private military horse. 9 generations executed. Just you wait, Lu Feng. He planned to report me to the county magistrate first thing in the morning. I knew nothing about this. I was standing at the kiln mouth, watching the fire, sweat rolling down my face, feeling like a man building an empire. Then I spotted riders approaching. The banner of the Dai escort agency snapped in the wind. Wu Ziang was on horseback, looking radiant, and Master Ji rode in a small sedan chair behind her with an escort of armed fighters. "Husband, I'm here," Wu Ziang called out the moment she saw me. Her face flushed pink, eyes shining. Master Ji groaned from his sedan. So much for maidenly restraint. I told her to watch that word. If my wives heard her calling me husband before anything was official, I'd have trouble in the bedroom tonight. She turned red as an apple, but didn't back down. Said she'd go talk to my wives herself and sort everything out. Master Ji cut in before things escalated further. The job was done. Tiger bones had sold for 3,350 taels. After the agency's commission, my share was 3,050 taels in banknotes and loose silver. Clean, honest accounting. They hadn't skimmed the extra 300 from the higher-than-expected sale price. I respected that. I led them home. The property was still under construction, messy, unfinished, but the stone-paved paths and trees gave it a rustic charm. When I called the sisters out, they panicked. Guests, real, important guests, and the yard was a disaster. They scrambled for benches, brewed tea, and lined up beside me with nervous bows. Wu Ziang watched my 2 wives fussing and giggled with delight. She was sizing them up. These were the women she'd be sharing a household with if things went her way. I introduced everyone calmly. The sisters went stiff when they heard escort agency. In their world, that meant dangerous, powerful people. They had no idea one of those dangerous people was already calling me husband behind their backs. Wan Qing recognized Wu Ziang's name immediately, the famous warrior woman of Wanwan County. The sisters straightened up and greeted her properly. Wu Ziang grabbed both their hands, showered them with compliments about their beauty, and said she finally understood why I was so devoted. Within minutes, the 3 women were chatting like lifelong friends. I left them to it. 3 women together make a whole opera, and they'd all be under the same roof eventually. I sat with Master Ji over tea. He looked around the half-finished property and offered to let my family stay at the escort agency for winter. Warm rooms, food, charcoal, all taken care of. I thanked him but declined. I designed a heated brick bed platform that would keep us warmer than any charcoal stove. He was intrigued and wanted details, but before I could explain, Chinger shrieked with excitement from across the yard. He actually agreed. The 3 women had apparently settled everything already. Wu Ziang had charmed my wives completely. In the backyard, she'd even gotten both sisters onto the black horse and taught them basic riding in minutes. The horse was tame with them. They'd been feeding it daily, and it trusted them. After half an hour, Master Ji reluctantly dragged Wu Ziang away. She didn't want to leave. When I asked my wives what they'd discussed, Chinger leaned against me and said they were already planning the wedding. Gifts, clothes, room decorations. Wan Qing was running numbers on how much everything would cost. They wanted to do it properly, partly to make up for their own bare-bones wedding. They'd saved nearly every coin I'd given them and wanted to spend it all on preparations. I told them I had the same idea. I was planning to give them a proper ceremony too, the one they'd never gotten. I'm going to take care of you both. You'll live in a big house, eat well, and never suffer again. That's a promise. Chinger looked up at me, and I kissed her hard before she could respond. Then I turned and kissed Wan Qing. She protested. It was broad daylight. The gate was open. Workers could walk in any moment. The protest didn't last long. The thrill of being caught seemed to excite her more than she'd ever admit. We ended up on the tea table, right there in the open yard. An hour later, I finally got dressed and headed back to work. Both wives were still flushed, legs unsteady. Chinger looked at me with those big round eyes and begged me to let her sleep through the night for once and spend the evening with her sister instead. Wan Qing shot her a look that said, "Don't you dare volunteer me alone." I laughed and walked out to the kiln, feeling like the luckiest man in any world. I was still joking around with the sisters when I spotted constables approaching. Leading them was my own brother-in-law, Mu Xiaoyang. I walked up to greet him with a smile, but his face was grim. Arrest him. My stomach dropped. A dozen thoughts flashed through my mind, but I chose not to resist. Running would mean abandoning everything I'd built. What's this about? Someone reported you for keeping a military horse. That's a capital offense. The magistrate ordered your arrest personally. The wooden cane snapped around my neck. Heavy, humiliating. Xiaoyang told me quietly that if I cooperated and handed the horse over, my capture of the barbarian scout might earn me leniency. The sisters heard the commotion and ran outside. Chinger saw me in chains, went white, and fainted on the spot. Wan Qing caught her, then turned to her brother demanding answers. Xiaoyang couldn't even look them in the eye. I stayed calm. Told Wan Qing to bring that thing to the county office to save me. She understood immediately. The silk pouch the old hermit had given me. The one he said could save a life in a moment of true crisis. She ran inside to find it, then gathered every tael of silver in the house. The horse was in the backyard. They found it in minutes. No point denying anything. The evidence was right there. I'd already figured out who reported me. Wang Changsheng. He was the only one with motive and opportunity. He must have seen the horse when he climbed that tree. 2 hours later, I was kneeling in the county magistrate's court. Who are you? Where do you live? What is your crime? The magistrate sat beneath a plaque reading, bright and just, looking anything but. He slammed his wooden block and called me a brazen criminal. His advisor chimed in on cue. By law, the punishment was execution. Bring in the witness. Wang Changxing limped in and dropped to his knees with exaggerated deference. He pointed at the black horse being led into the hall and told his story. How he'd seen me bring the horse home with the barbarian prisoner, assumed I'd turned it in, then discovered I'd hidden it in my backyard. He'd nearly broken his leg climbing a tree to confirm it. The magistrate and his advisor performed their rehearsed routine. Crime confirmed, punishment clear, death sentence warranted. Meanwhile, Wan Qing was racing toward the city with the mysterious pouch, every silver coin we owned, and a desperate plan. She intended to bribe her way through Xiaoyang, then find Wu Ziang at the escort agency for backup. The silk pouch was a last resort she didn't actually believe in. I knelt on the cold stone floor and waited. I'd survived worse than corrupt officials. If the pouch failed, money would talk. And if money failed, well, there wasn't a prison in this county that could hold me. Just as I'd guessed, Wang Changxing was the one who reported me. I still couldn't figure out how he'd seen the horse in the backyard, but it didn't matter anymore. In my mind, he was already a dead man. The magistrate was about to deliver the sentence when Wang Changxing interrupted. He wasn't satisfied with just the horse charge. He pointed out that I'd gone from a penniless drunk to a man building brick kilns and renovating property in a matter of weeks. Where did the money come from? He suggested I was the one who'd raided the pawn shop. The magistrate's eyes lit up like lanterns. He'd been desperate to close that case. Thousands of taels missing, no leads, and the pawn shop had been his own business. If he could pin it on me, he'd solve the case and seize my assets in one stroke. My stomach tightened. The pawn shop raid was actually my doing, and the silver at home really was from the gambling house and the robbery. If they searched my property thoroughly, I was finished. This wasn't something money could fix anymore. The magistrate would just pocket whatever I offered and execute me anyway. He asked Mu Xiaoyang to confirm Wang Chongqing's claims. My brother-in-law had no choice but to admit that yes, I was building and spending heavily. He tried to add more context, but the magistrate cut him off. Death sentence. Tomorrow at noon. Execution by beheading. Then a voice like a bronze bell shook the courtroom. Hold. Chen Dianyu, the county jailer, walked in like a mountain moving through the doorway. He stared the magistrate dead in the eyes and said, "Kill this man, and you die too." He placed the yellow silk pouch on the magistrate's desk. The old hermit's mysterious gift. The magistrate glanced at it dismissively, then froze. His face drained of color. The pouch was made of gold thread cloud silk, a material reserved exclusively for the imperial family. Only direct blood relatives of the emperor were permitted to possess it. Chen Dianyu explained what it was. He'd seen similar items only once before, on imperial edicts carried by his former general. Whatever was inside that pouch was connected to the highest power in the empire. The magistrate reached for it with trembling hands, wanting to look inside. Chen Dianyu slapped his hand away. "Open that, and your entire clan dies." 9 generations. The magistrate recoiled like he'd touched fire. His fingers shook. He looked at me kneeling on the floor and couldn't comprehend how a village nobody possessed something that could get an entire bloodline executed. Wang Chongsheng was pressed flat to the ground, forehead dripping sweat, not daring to breathe. I was just as confused. The old man had said it was something he'd stumbled upon. He was supposed to be a retired fortune teller. Had he read the stars for the imperial family? Wan Qing had made all this happen. She'd followed the prisoner escort to the city, found Wu Ziang at the escort agency, and together they'd rushed to Chen Dianyu. The moment he saw the pouch, he understood its significance and stormed into the courtroom. Now the magistrate was calling Chen Dianyu, "Sir," instead of "Jailer," begging for advice on what to do. Chen Dianyu turned to admire the black horse. "Fine animal. You've noticed the empire is short on quality horses, haven't you, magistrate? Didn't the governor's office recently order all counties to breed and raise military horses? He was building me an escape route, reframing the crime as patriotic service." I knelt there silently and let the smartest man in the room do his work. The magistrate caught on to Chen Dianyu's hint immediately. Case dismissed. Lu Feng is innocent. He declared that since I had exceptional horse-raising skills, I was hereby ordered, under the governor's directive, to establish a horse farm in Siwa village to breed war horses for the empire. The county's existing stable of over 300 military horses would be transferred to my care. I'd receive 30 taels monthly for feed, 10 taels for every successfully bred foal, and 30 taels for every battle-ready warhorse produced. I could barely contain myself. A horse farm in ancient times was like owning a gold mine. The legendary Monkey King had been given horses to tend and ended up challenging heaven itself. Who knew where this might lead me? "Thank you, Your Honor." Chen Dianyu grinned, unlocked my chains personally, and slipped the silk pouch back into my hand. I asked him what was really inside. He just laughed and said he didn't have the courage to look. Seeing the contents could cost you your head. Wang Chongsheng was still kneeling on the floor, shaking like a leaf. The magistrate turned his fury on him. False accusations against a fellow villager, jealousy toward a man of talent, failure in his duties as village chief. 100 strikes of the punishment rod, and his position as village chief was stripped and handed to me. Wang Chongsheng begged and wept, smashing his forehead bloody against the stone floor. It changed nothing. They dragged him out and beat him on the bench. He was already injured from the wild boar attack, so a few strokes in he was screaming and unconscious. He'd be half dead by the time they finished. I went to inspect the county's horse stable. 300 war horses stood in rows, but they were a pitiful sight, skinny, dull-coated, poorly fed. The magistrate had been pocketing the feed budget. These animals that were supposed to defend the empire could barely stand straight. Chen Dianyu shook his head at the state of them. I told him not to worry, the bones were still good. With proper feeding and care, these horses could be battle-ready within months. He told me something interesting. The emperor had dispatched his greatest commander to the Yuzhou border, a woman known as the Scarlet Feather General, leader of the legendary Fengling army. She'd been a general at 16. Twin swords, blue armor, white cape, a red feather on her helm, that symbolized supreme authority. Nobody knew her real name. Shen Jianyu said if I worked hard enough, I might join the Fengling army someday. Every man in the empire dreamed of serving under the scarlet feather banner. I told him that if I ever met this famous female general, she'd probably end up as my fourth wife. He nearly choked laughing. Said her 4 vice commanders would skin me alive for saying that. The next day, 300 horses were marched to Siwa village. Tian Laoba rallied the entire village and built a basic horse farm in a single day. The county sent a low-ranking stable official, 3 constables, and 30 soldiers to guard the operation. The official thought he was too important for a grass hut and went home after one night. Feeding 300 horses was a massive operation. Every woman in the village was cutting grass, and it still wasn't enough. I asked Wu Ziang to use the escort agency's network to buy feed supplies from across the region. Hay, wheat bran, bean husks, everything horses needed to survive winter. Half a month passed. The first frost arrived, temperatures dropped sharply, and my first batch of bricks came out of the kiln, perfectly fired and ready to build with. I was now the village chief, owner of a horse farm, and a man the county magistrate was afraid to touch. Wang Changsheng was bedridden and broken. The village was mine. The first kiln produced over 4,000 usable bricks, more than enough for my winter projects. When the second rotation of guards arrived for the horse farm, Mu Xiaoyang was among them. I immediately put him and 2 constables to work on construction. He stared at the brick structure I was building and asked what it was. I told him it was called a heated bed platform, a kong. Connected to the cooking stove, it used the fire's heat to warm the entire sleeping surface. You could sleep naked in the dead of winter and feel nothing but comfort. He didn't believe me until it was finished 2 days later. I also installed a water jar between the 2 stoves so the cooking fire would keep it warm, not boiling, but enough that washing your hands in winter wouldn't be agony. Xiaoyang studied every step, planning to build one for his own wife when he got home. The house frame was nearly done too, thanks to Tian Laoba's crew. 3 more days, and we'd have a roof. Then I'd move everything from the old straw hut, tear it down, and come spring, build a storehouse with a cellar and hidden rooms on that spot. Wang Jian and the other apprentices had finally gotten competent under my training. Their archery had improved dramatically, and they were bringing home enough rabbits and pheasants that I didn't need to hunt anymore. Meat was no longer a concern. Over dinner with Xiaoyang, stewed pheasant, meat porridge, and deer blood wine. He gave me a warning I needed to hear. 3 bandit gangs operated in Wenwang County. The biggest was called Sky Beyond Sky. Then there was High Reed Peak. The most dangerous was Downstream Fort, based where 7 waterways merged at the border between 2 counties. Hundreds of ruthless killers lived there. During winter, when the rivers froze, they lost their income from river tolls and fishing, so they'd raid villages. In recent years, they'd grown bold enough to slaughter entire settlements and attack military supply convoys. 300 war horses would be an irresistible target. On the black market, a single horse fetched over 100 taels. My entire farm was worth a fortune that could feed their whole gang for life. The 50 guards the county had assigned, mostly raw recruits who could barely hold a sword properly, wouldn't last one charge against seasoned bandits. I thanked Xiaoyang seriously. Wu Ziang had mentioned the bandits before, but hearing the details drove home the urgency. I needed my own fighting force. A hunting party that could double as a private militia. Men trained in mountain warfare who could earn their keep through hunting and defend the village when needed. That night, lying between my 2 wives after the usual evening exercise, I mapped it all out in my head. The horse farm, the brick kiln, the new house, the land I now controlled, the escort agency connection through Wu Ziang, and soon a trained fighting unit of my own. The pieces were coming together. By spring, Siwa village would be a fortress, and it would be mine completely. I got to work immediately. Called in Wang Dian, Zhang Hongda, and Li Long, tested their archery, then set them to mass-producing arrows while I crafted 6 new hard bows from the mulberry with Tian Laoba had stockpiled. Each bow was good for over 100 paces. Then I selected 6 more young men from the village, the most reliable ones, and organized everyone into 3-man squads with my 3 apprentices as team leaders. 9 fighters total. I sent them into the mountains to train through real hunting. 3-man cells, supporting each other, learning to fight as a unit. The same formation that had won great battles in my old world. They'd barely left when Tian Lao Ba came running, out of breath. The feed reserves for the horse farm were almost gone. The shipment from the escort agency should have arrived yesterday, but never came. 2 days of supply left for 300 horses. Something was wrong. I'd signed a long-term contract with the agency, and 2/3 of the government feed allowance went directly to their accounts. Wu Santong wouldn't just disappear with the money. I saddled up the black horse. I'd named him Wu Jue and rode toward town. Before I'd gotten far, I met the supply convoy limping toward the village. Every escort was wounded. They told me what happened. On the road from Chishui County, a bear had attacked without warning. The same bear that had been terrorizing our mountains. Wu Santong had fought it to protect the convoy and his men. He'd been mauled badly. Wu Xiang had pulled her father from the bear's jaws, barely saving his life. She then sent the lightly wounded men ahead with the feed while she rushed her father back to town for treatment. The escort handed me a stack of banknotes. The agency was returning all my money. Wu Santong felt responsible for the failure and refused to keep a single coin. That made me angry. They'd been hurt doing a job for me. I wasn't taking money back from injured men. I told them to unload the feed, then had the sisters cook meat porridge for everyone. I rode to the escort agency with them after they'd eaten. The moment I stepped inside, the smell of herbal medicine hit me. A dozen clay pots bubbled on the veranda, brewing treatments for the wounded. Wu Santong lay on a wooden board in the main hall, too badly hurt to be moved to a bed. Wu Xiang knelt beside him, eyes swollen from crying. She'd tried going after the bear that morning with a few escorts, but came back empty-handed. Now she was screaming at Master Ji, demanding to take the family's treasured bow and hunt the beast down. Ji was blocking the door, trying to reason with her. She couldn't draw that bow to full power. The bear had already defeated her father and a dozen trained fighters. Going alone was suicide. If I can't pull it, someone else can, she shouted. I'll find him. If he's too scared to help, then I was blind to ever want him. Master Ji's voice went cold. Even if Lu Feng agrees, your father might be dying. Are you going to drag him down with you? That stopped her. She crumpled, sobbing, completely lost. Then she heard my voice from the courtyard. How's the chief doing? Her head snapped up. She saw me walking toward her, worry plain on my face. The relief that flooded her eyes was something I'll never forget. At the moment she needed someone most, I'd shown up. I rushed into the main hall, and my heart sank. Wu Santong was in terrible shape, bandages soaked through with blood on his chest, arms, legs, and worst of all his abdomen. A bear's claw had ripped across his stomach. If he'd been a fraction slower, that single strike would have killed him instantly. Only years of martial training had kept him alive this long. 2 local doctors stood there shaking their heads. They said even the legendary physician Hua Tuo couldn't save him. Best they could do was keep him comfortable for a few more days. Wu Xiang collapsed into tears again, begging me to avenge her father. I touched Wu Santong's forehead, burning with fever. I'd seen enough combat wounds to know exactly what was happening. Infection. The wounds themselves weren't fatal. No organs damaged, no major blood loss. But bacteria were spreading, and without treatment, he'd be dead within 2 or 3 days. If only I had antibiotics. But this was ancient times. I had to improvise. I barked orders at the doctors. Brew honeysuckle, forsythia, and dandelion together and force it down his throat every half hour. Then I asked Master Ji for garlic, as much as possible, and mugwort. Garlic had natural antibacterial properties. Mugwort could be processed into something resembling the artemisinin that had revolutionized medicine in my old world. The herbal brews wouldn't cure him, but they'd slow the infection and buy time. The doctors questioned my prescriptions. They'd never seen such combinations in their careers. I didn't have time to argue. Master Ji looked at me, looked at the dying man, and made the call. Do what he says. I'll take responsibility. I told the wounded escorts the same medicine would be prepared for all of them. The agency wouldn't abandon anyone. That steadied the room. Wu Xiang asked what she should do. Get your weapons. We're going to kill that bear. Her eyes went wide. Just the 2 of us? Every able fighter in the agency was either injured or needed here. There was nobody else. She set her jaw. Fine. If we die, at least we die together. Husband and wife in the afterlife. She started toward the family bow, but I stopped her. That massive weapon was slow to draw and weighed a ton, useless against a charging bear at close range. I had my crossbow. Just follow me. I swung onto Wuzhui and reached down for her hand. She hesitated. Sharing a horse meant pressing her whole body against mine, and we weren't married yet. The fearless warrior woman was suddenly shy. I goaded her. Scared? I thought you didn't care about convention. That did it. She grabbed my hand, vaulted up behind me, and wrapped her arms tight around my waist. I could feel her heart hammering against my back. The horse, that clever beast, started running with an exaggerated swaying gait, bouncing her against me with every stride. She gasped and held tighter, which only made things worse. Her face was burning red against my shoulder. Is this horse broken? She demanded. I told her Wuzhui was a barbarian stallion who hadn't been near a mare in too long. Just hold on tight. She squeezed harder. I grinned into the wind. This woman was everything I wanted: brave, honest, fierce, built like a goddess. If I could win her fully, she'd be worth 2 of my wives and stamina alone. For people in one bed every night. A man could dream. We reached the ambush site quickly. Wuzhui was fast. The whole ride, Wu Ziang held on to me so tight I could feel every curve of her body through my back. She was completely flustered, heart pounding, face burning, making small sounds she didn't understand. She'd never been this close to a man before and genuinely thought she might be sick. At the scene, overturned carts and scattered feed confirmed the story. Vegetables and radishes had been gnawed on. The bear was hungry but not starving. That was actually good news. A desperate bear fights with everything it has. A fed one is slower, less reckless. I tied Wuzhui to a tree. The horse was relaxed, which told me the bear wasn't nearby. If it were, the horse would be panicking. I gave Wu Ziang my hunting bow and kept the crossbow and spear for myself. My plan was simple, but our options were limited. Just 2 people, no time to dig a proper pit trap. So we'd use a snare instead. We found a tree with enough flexibility, bent it down together, and rigged a rope loop on the ground, camouflaged with leaves. It wouldn't hold a bear for long, but even a few seconds of confusion would give us a killing window. I told her to stay hidden, watch for the bear to step into the snare, then attack with everything she had while it was tangled. We didn't wait long. A crashing sound came from the trees. The bear emerged, black fur, massive frame, standing upright on hind legs like a wall of muscle. 3 meters tall, 2 meters wide. Enormous claws raking the ground, roaring. Seeing it in person, I understood how Wang Fei had died instantly and how Wu Santong had nearly been killed. Those apprentices of mine were lucky to be alive. The bear locked onto me and charged. I raised the crossbow and fired at its head. The beast was moving too fast, shaking side to side. The bolt hit its shoulder instead. It sank into the thick fat layer and stuck there. The bear screamed with pain and rage, but barely slowed down. That blubber was like armor. Good. Now it was angry and focused entirely on me. I turned and ran toward the snare. Then everything went wrong. Wu Ziang panicked. The bear's roar had shaken her nerves, and she swung her sword reflexively, cutting the wrong direction. The sound whistled past me. I tried to dodge, but my foot caught on something. The snare loop tightened around my ankle. The bent tree snapped upright with terrifying force and yanked me into the air. I was hanging upside down from my own trap, swinging helplessly, with a furious wounded bear charging straight at me. I was dangling upside down from my own trap like an idiot. The sudden jerk knocked my spear and crossbow loose. They tumbled toward the ground. In that split second, I clamped my feet together and caught the spear between them. The snare was designed for a bear, not a man. The loop was wide and loose. It had only caught around my neck by accident. Once I swung upward, the vine slack gave me full use of my arms and legs. The bear charged directly beneath me and leaped, claws reaching for my chest. That was exactly what I needed. I kicked free of the vine, flipped the spear downward, and drove it straight into the bear's forehead, using every ounce of falling momentum. The blade punched deep into its skull. The massive body crumpled beneath me, breaking my fall like a cushion. I rolled off without a scratch. Wu Ziang had seen me get yanked into the air and thought I was dead. She'd already grabbed her sword and was charging the bear in a blind rage, screaming she'd kill it. Then she heard my voice telling her to stop. She froze mid-stride, looked over, and saw me standing beside the dead bear, grinning at her. The spear shaft came out clean when I pulled, but the iron tip stayed buried in the bear's brain. 3 tails of silver, gone forever. She dropped her sword and ran to me, sobbing, apologizing over and over for nearly getting me killed. Her tears soaked my neck as she clung to me. She was tall, only a head shorter than me, and pressed against me like that, crying and shaking. She was irresistible. I tilted her chin up with one finger. You almost got me killed. I think you owe me some compensation. Compensation? She blinked through her tears, confused. I kissed her. Her whole body went rigid, arms frozen in the air, trembling, brain completely short-circuited. I softened the kiss and held her gently until she relaxed. She closed her eyes and let it happen. In her mind, a kiss was just a kiss. She'd seen the young escorts sneaking off to the brothel plenty of times. She could handle this. No big deal. A kiss wouldn't make her pregnant. Then I pulled her closer, fully against me, no space between us. Her courage shattered instantly. Wait, I'm not ready. She shoved me back, hands guarding her chest, face redder than I'd ever seen on any woman. But then something shifted in her eyes. She marched back to me, grabbed my face, and kissed me herself. Not gracefully, more like biting. Wild, clumsy, completely real. After a moment she whispered, "Enough?" Then she took my hand and placed it on her chest. Over the clothes. I was stunned. This girl who supposedly knew nothing about men was playing me like a master. Push and pull, advance and retreat. Before I could press further, she jumped back like a startled rabbit, face blazing. That's all you get until we're married. You want more, go home to your wives or show up at the martial arts contest and win. And you'd better win decisively, because if you lose, I'll kill you on that stage. Then I'll kill myself. You've taken my first kiss. You don't get to belong to anyone else. I laughed. This woman was something else entirely. Fierce, pure, bold, and playing a game I hadn't expected. She deserved everything I could give her. On the ride back, she refused to share the horse at first. I talked her into it eventually. The same bouncing, the same pressing, the same burning red cheeks. By the time we reached the escort agency, she was completely undone, hating every second of the ride and never wanting it to end. On the ride back, I had a chat with Wu Jue about his reward, 10 carats and a mate. He got so excited he nearly bucked me off. I had to negotiate him down to 2 mares. Greedy horse. Though looking at his stubby northern build next to the taller war horses at the farm, I wondered how the logistics would even work. At the escort agency, I arranged for men to retrieve the bear carcass while the scattered feed was hauled back to the village. It was too late to ride home, so I stayed the night. Master G had followed my instructions perfectly. Fresh garlic collected in bulk, herbal medicine administered every hour. Wu Santong's condition hadn't worsened. Good sign. I set to work extracting what I could from the garlic. Wu Ziang and her female disciples peeled and minced mountains of it while I assembled a crude distillation setup from every bottle and jar in the agency. The concentrated garlic extract went on to Wu Santong's wounds, and the liquid form was given to him and the worst injured escorts to drink. The 3 local doctors watched with open contempt, fully expecting Wu Santong to die so they could laugh at my methods. Wu Ziang kept her distance from the bear carcass when the men brought it back. The girl who'd charged it with a sword yesterday couldn't even look at it today. Women are mysteries. Next morning I hit the market, bought quality mulberry wood for a new bow, picked up a replacement spear tip from the blacksmith, and ordered more arrowheads. Having the official horse farm gave me legal cover. The government paperwork said I needed weapons to guard the facility, so nobody questioned bulk orders for military-grade equipment. What the authorities didn't know was that half of it would arm my private hunting squads, and the rest would be sold through the escort agency for profit. I'd barely left the agency when Wu Santong woke up. He thanked the 3 doctors first, assuming they'd saved him. Wu Ziang set him straight with a glare at the useless physicians. It was Lu Feng. He came when you were dying, treated your wounds with methods nobody had ever seen, then rode out and killed the bear that nearly killed you. Wu Santong choked on his water. He couldn't believe it. He'd dismissed me as a strong farmer who could pull a bow. Now he was hearing I was a healer and a bear killer too. Master G laid it all out for him. I hadn't just saved his life. I'd refused to take back the contract money, brought supplies and meat for the injured men, left the bear carcass for the agency to sell, and continued the feed partnership as if nothing had happened. The old man went quiet. He'd looked down on me, thought I wasn't good enough for his daughter, and I'd repaid his contempt by saving his life, his people, and his business. The escort agency had been dying before I showed up. The tiger bones, the bear, the long-term feed contract had brought them back from the edge. Wu Ziang stood beside him, eyes shining with love whenever she said my name. There was no fighting it anymore. Wu Santong slapped his thigh, then winced because his thigh was injured too. Tomorrow we go to Siwa village. I'm thanking that young man in person. There was more to the martial arts contest than met the eye. Wu Santong had his own reasons for insisting on the formal process. But in his heart, he'd already accepted me as his son-in-law. That much was clear. When I got back to the village, my two wives were asleep in the yard, wrapped in thin coats, waiting for me in the cold. They'd stayed up all night again. Their hands and feet were freezing. I carried them to bed one at a time and tucked them in. Then I went to settle things with Wang Changsheng. His house told the whole story before I even walked in. Leaves piled on the steps, gate shut tight, silence everywhere. His brother was dead. His wife had been divorced and thrown out. His workers had all come to work for me. Even his butler had vanished. The Grand Wang estate now held just one old cook and two servants. When the servant led me inside, Wang Changsheng was lying face down on a bed. The 100 strokes from the magistrate's court had left him barely able to move. The moment he saw me, he screamed and tried to crawl into the corner. He knew what I was. He'd tried to have me executed and failed. Now I'd come to collect. I sat on the edge of his bed and asked one question. Do you want to live? His survival instinct won. Yes. Anything. Whatever you want. Simple. I want every land deed your family owns. I held up 5 fingers. He guessed 500 taels and almost had a heart attack. His entire estate wasn't worth that much in these times. 50 taels, I said, and slapped him across the face. He called it robbery. Extortion. I told him to think of it differently. He'd spent 50 taels bribing the magistrate to have me killed. I was just evening the score and throwing in a land purchase as a bonus. Then I asked where the family's hidden savings were. He resisted for about 10 seconds before the fear broke him. He told me everything. I cleaned out the Wang household. Gold, silver, 2 full boxes of property deeds covering the best land in the village. Then I dropped a 50-tael banknote on his bed. I keep my word. 50 taels for everything. But starting now, this is the Lu residence. You have 3 days to pack and leave. If you're still here after that, I'll have you dragged out. He managed one shaking word. Fine. I walked out, jumped up, and ripped the Wang family plaque off the gate. Stomped it to splinters and told the cook to use it for firewood. Wang Changsheng would take his 50 taels and try to leave the county. On the road, he'd run into bandits. That was guaranteed in these times. The silver would be the first thing they'd take from him. Whether he survived after that was heaven's business, not mine. The important thing was that he didn't die in the village. If he died here, people would blame me. If he died out there on the road to bandits, well, that was just the dangerous world we lived in. 50 taels. The last bit of value Wang Changsheng would ever produce. If the bandits who robbed him eventually came looking for the source of that silver, they'd find Siwa village, and I'd be ready for them. Everything had a purpose. I'd been studying the bandit problem in Wenhuang County. The water fortress downstream was the biggest threat, hundreds of men in a maze of rivers, nearly impossible to root out. The other 2 gangs were smaller. Sky Beyond Sky had about 100 fighters, High Reed Peak maybe 80. Still too many for me to handle alone, especially with so much to protect now. I'd already asked Wu Ziang to make contact with Sky Beyond Sky through the escort agency's existing relationship. They were the most reasonable of the 3. They took payment and kept their word. By my count, their messenger should have arrived by now. Walking home from the Wang estate with boxes of seized treasure, I sensed someone in the tree above me. I kept walking. A man dropped down behind me and pressed a blade against my back. He recited a coded phrase. Sky Beyond Sky's man. His name was Wang Dinglu. Short, thin, poorly dressed, but sharp-eyed and disciplined. I, accidentally, dropped my box and let silver coins scatter across the ground. Watched his reaction carefully. His eyes flickered to the money, then went clear again. No greed. Good sign. I laid out the deal. A man named Wang Changsheng would be leaving the area within 3 days with about 50 taels on him. For people total, 1 master, 2 servants, 1 old cook. Easy pickings. Wang Dinglu understood immediately. He confirmed the job, promised to relay it to his boss, and reminded me that Sky Beyond Sky was available for future work, as long as the money was right. Then he vanished into the forest like smoke. Professional. I like that. If the whole gang operated this way, they might be worth recruiting someday. Back home, the sisters were waiting with hot porridge. I scolded them gently for standing in the cold and warned them that freezing their bodies could affect their ability to have children. That got their attention fast. Nothing motivates those two like the thought of giving me sons. I sent Tian Lao Ba with a crew and the ox cart up the mountain to dig out every last sweet potato from that patch. 3 full cartloads came back, a small mountain of them. Sweet potatoes couldn't survive frost, so everything went inside the new house. Come spring, I'd plant them across all the dry hillside land I now owned. The river fields would grow rice and vegetables, but the rocky slopes needed something tough and high-yielding. Sweet potatoes were perfect. I had Wan Qing steam a batch and cook sweet potato porridge for everyone, then headed to the horse farm. The animals were looking better, coats getting shinier, bones less visible. They'd be fully recovered by spring. Wu Jue was pacing between 2 mares I'd paired him with, looking uncertain. I laughed and slapped his rump. Get to work. 10 times a day minimum. I need those ladies pregnant. This wasn't just about breeding for fun. If I could cross the northern barbarian bloodline, built for speed and endurance, with the taller local horses, the offspring might combine the best of both. A horse like that would be worth a fortune, and every army in the empire would want them. Wu Jue stared at me blankly. I told him to figure it out. I carefully selected 2 mares for Wu Jue and put them on special diets with extra soybeans. Wu Jue himself got the best feed in the entire farm, plus a daily egg. If my crossbreeding experiment worked, combining northern speed with local size, the offspring would be worth a fortune. I'd organized my key people by now. Tian Lao Ba ran the horse farm since he was the sharpest and could deal with county officials. Wang San, the former hunter who knew carpentry, managed the brick kiln. Yang the cripple, the most honest of the 3, handled household construction and would take charge of the sweet potato fields come spring. These 3 had been with me from the start and earned my deepest trust. Beyond them were my 9 hunters, 3 squad leaders, and 6 fighters, training daily in the mountains. After inspecting the farm and kiln, I came home to find the sisters had prepared red sweet potato porridge with wild boar meat and warm wine wrapped in oiled paper. These 2 ran the household flawlessly. Wan Qing had news. Her childhood friend had written back and wanted to meet in Tianyong City during the Great Snow Festival, the biggest celebration of the year, even bigger than New Year. The whole city would be full of festivities. This worked perfectly. Wu Xiang's martial arts contest was scheduled for the same time and place. I'd take my wives, meet their friend, and win myself a 3rd wife all in one trip. That evening I brought food and wine up the mountain to visit the old hermit. The path was covered in dead leaves. His flowers had all wilted with the season. I found him in his rocking chair, eyes closed, peaceful expression, teacup empty. I called out to him. No answer. I checked his breathing. He was gone. Passed quietly, on his own terms, exactly as he'd lived. I buried him behind his house, facing northwest, just as he'd asked. No name on the stone. No ceremony. He wouldn't have wanted any fuss. Going through his things, I found a small dagger that caught my eye. Beautifully made, gleaming cold. I tested it against my axe blade. 1 tap, and the axe edge curled like paper. This was wrought steel. In an age where most iron was barely functional, this blade could cut through anything. The old man had left me yet another treasure without saying a word. The dagger gave me an idea. I already had the brick kiln running. The next step was building a proper blast furnace to smelt steel. With bandits threatening from 3 directions and war approaching from the north, I needed weapons. Real weapons, not the cheap iron junk sold at market. Buying arrowheads 1 batch at a time wouldn't cut it anymore. I needed to manufacture my own steel and arm my people properly. That meant finding a skilled blacksmith and carpenter willing to relocate to the village. I was sitting in the yard planning all this when Wan Qing came out with a heavy coat for me. The wind was picking up. I pulled her onto my lap instead. 1 coat isn't enough to warm me up. Are you warmer than charcoal? She blushed to her neck, protested weakly, then unbuttoned her collar and pressed herself against me. Her skin was hot against the cold air. I buried my face deeper and decided that strategic planning could wait a little while longer.